He'd go
possibly
further.
have,
Yeah, I will say XO has pointed out some pretty profound things to me before, though, like that I didn't see in the Bible and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean,
yeah. If you know EXO, he's usually like always speaking from a position of like he's totally against the globe, but he goes over and out into because he knows like his wife is like a Hebrew, like she speaks Hebrew, the language, and they like depict the language in the Bible, and they point out things like how it's such controversy to where they're like pointing out like this is not what it says, and then he dives into that so deep he kind of like washes out his message though, like you get what I'm saying, like he loses his message in the fact that he's trying to prove to you.
If he said
Yeah, so we were about to read some PDFs. Yep, thank you, Riggs.
Bring your
so
own.
that's
Bring your own.
the thing that we're gonna have to figure out here, because we're getting to the point now where there's a finite amount of Brenner comps, so we need to be careful now. I think we've already read a couple of them like more than once, so
Now
we'll just
wait,
need to be
I pose a question to the audience. Is it possible to read a Brenner comp too many times?
Oh,
because like that's the thing. It's like, oh, there's a finite number, but you can just reread it again, though, right?
Yeah,
and absorb more knowledge from it. So I don't know.
Is it something that the more you read it, the more you like comprehend it? Is that it's one of those things?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. I feel you, Alan. I feel you. That's true. That's true. You just got to keep diving in. You got to keep it going. But what's the overall message, though? That's kind of like the whole point. What is, like, can anybody explain that in your own, divine, understanding? What is the message that's trying to be spread? You get what I'm saying?
No. Yo, did you find any comps to read, Toby?
Yo, yeah, no, I haven't found one yet. Let me pull one up.
Carice has What Are Fake Forces? Is this a Brenner comp?
Yes, that is a Brenner comp.
Ooh, we have a Brenner comp. Okay.
Ooh, and we should read this one in honor of History Lad. Is history true?
Oh, History Lad.
That's a good one, by the way. I read it the other day. Might trigger some of the Christians in here, to be honest, though.
Also insanely long.
Let's see, how long is this? Well, this one's really short.
Yeah, History Lad's not worth it. Too long, too off topic.
History is of the victors, right? Technically.
Yeah.
So
say,
is that trusted? I don't know.
Who tested Newton's theory on the cannonball experiment? That's a pretty interesting question.
That's a classic. We should definitely read that.
Insanely long. Okay, we'll read it. This looks good. A bit winded, but good.
Yeah, the Fake Forces one looks good too. We'll read those.
Cool. Well, thank you, live listeners, for being here. Sorry for the, well, I don't apologize. Y'all got a little sneak peek behind the scenes. Cool. So we got what are fake
Has anyone
forces.
done what I'm gonna do? What is the universe? If no one's done that
Ooh,
yet, I
that
want
was
to do.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to head us
All right.
off, Dave?
Well, this-
I can start us off otherwise.
All right.
Or would you rather, Dave?
oh, please go for it.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Oh, no stone tonight? We might as well jack up that bit rate. Boom. Full blast. All right. Who tested Newton's theory on the cannonball experiment?
Oh, can you share screen? Oh, you're sharing.
Oh,
never
yeah,
mind.
I am.
Yep, my bad.
Cool.
The issue was me. All right, here we go.
Cool. Who tested Newton's theory on the cannonball experiment? Nobody, really. It has always remained an adventure of the mind, an act of wishful thinking without intellectual rigor and with no experimental backup. Bonaventura Cavalieri experimented with ballistics before Newton and came to the conclusion that free fall is independent of any other motion a body might have, something that is still taught today in every mechanics class in the world. Horizontally launched projectiles. A horizontally launched projectile is a projectile launched with only horizontal speed. Its initial vertical speed is 0. Since the only force acting on the projectile is gravity, which is in the vertical downward direction, only the vertical motion is affected. Gravity causes a downward acceleration. The cannonball falls the same amount of distance as it did when it was merely dropped from rest. Perpendicular components of motion are independent of each other. Newton starts his thought experiment with Cavalieri's cannonball and extrapolates from standard ballistic parabolas to orbits, which are not even in thought holds true, as we will see. So we have creased. Let's just take a look here. I think it's just for the image. Oh, here we go. So we have showing projectiles being launched around a sphere here. And we have more velocity. And because the celestial motions are scarcely retarded by the little or no resistance of the spaces in which they are performed, to keep up the parity of cases, let us suppose either that there is no air about the Earth, or at least that it is endowed with little or no power of resisting. And for the same reason, the body projected with a less velocity describes the lesser RVD, and with a greater velocity, the greater RVE, and augmenting the velocity, it goes further and further. Wow. That's quite a leap. What?
Big time. Big time. That's a huge leap because they're trying to. Oh my gosh.
If the velocity was still more and more augmented, it would reach at last quite beyond the circumference of the Earth and return to the mountain from which it was projected. Huh. The cannonball always falls to the ground in the same amount of time, no matter what velocity, and that time is only dependent on height and gravitational acceleration. T equals the square root of 2h over g. Because g is a factor of position, g equals gm over r squared, it is never constant, not even for 2 consecutive nanometers. So it's always an average between the alleged elevation of the ISS and the ground. That would be 8.7 plus 9.8 over 2, which equals 9.2. So Hale and Co. don't even try that argument. Next argument is that the gravitational vector rotates over large distances, which is also flawed. First, because the curvature of a sphere is always 1 over r already from the first nanometer. And then nobody has shown that the gravitational vector has any executive power in physics, that it can lock velocity into perpendicular relationship. So we show here Newton's law of gravity. Orbits. Moon is constantly in free fall, as are all orbiting objects, always falling to Earth but never getting closer. There is no reason to believe and no experiment to support the idea that after the first red centripetal arrow, the velocity now has changed direction. In fact, all experiments show the contrary to be the case. Free fall is always independent of any other motion. Then the thought process itself is flawed, as it supposes a moment where gravity does not exist in order to allow the object to move along a tangential path. If anything, because gravity is always present, the object always falls from the first instance, but then it has to be lifted up to remain on constant elevation. And here we see with red arrows the necessity for a lift force, which is introduced via velocity F equals mv, uh, or F equals mv squared over r. But free fall cannot introduce a lift force, and thus this remains wild and irrational speculation. Or rather, it reveals the deceptive approach, as this is hammer throw physics, not free fall physics. Yeah, the tether. The hammer is on a forced path where it puts a stretch load on the leash, and if the leash does not hold up, it breaks. Why does it break? Because of F equals mv squared over r being greater than the tensile strength of the leash. What is the tensile strength of free fall? Fun little image. The planet is not in free fall. It represents the forced hammer throw math of orbital mechanics, where, in NASA's own words, centrifugal acceleration A equals v squared times. What's he doing here? Why does it have. Well, over r plus h, I suppose. So acceleration equals velocity times velocity squared times r plus h balances gravity. G equals gm over r plus h squared.
Uh, which formula were you reading? The first one
I
there?
think there's a typo here. This one here. A equals v squared over r plus h.
Oh, I guess that's well, let's see. I think it's yeah, he has the parentheses. The first parenthesis should be to the right of the division sign.
That makes sense. That seems right. Okay. Thank you, Eric. So yeah, and it was indeed then a equals v squared over r plus h. And that balances gravity. G equals gm over r plus h squared. Here we have the radius. We have height, radius of the orbit. There you go.
Do they account for the shift or no?
Now it's just a magical force that just goes in circles forever.
It's crazy, bro. Like, come on. How do you not equate the shift that they believe to be without enforcing their, formula that they presented? I don't get that. I'm really lost. It seems like it's counterproductive in their own formula. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, the formula itself is kind of just a cheap trick. Like you've got
Exactly.
mass, gravity times mass over The radius of the orbit. So it's just an assumption here, essentially.
But it's weird because within their own formula, they don't account for everything, the variables that would displace their calculations. It's kind of weird. I don't know. I might be wrong, but I don't know.
No, it is weird. I mean, he points this out in several of his comps, several of his entries. You can't have it constantly accelerating and just free falling at the same time. It makes no sense.
Yep.
Exactly.
Let's keep going here. The microgravity allegedly experienced on the ISS is in theory the result of the gravity attenuating effect of A equals V squared over R, which when tuned just right, nullifies effective gravity altogether. And that happens when the velocity takes on the value of V equals the square root of gm over R. The same is true for the 0G plane, which flies along a powered parabola, not a free fall parabola, at the top of which the same principle applies. Centrifugal acceleration nullifies gravity, and for a short time slot of around 20 seconds, you feel like there is no gravity. We have normal gravity, 1.8 G. Then we get the little bit of Martian gravity here, 0.38 G. Go down to lunar gravity, 0.16 G, and eventually you get a little bit of 0 G in there. Then you get some more hypergravity and some normal gravity. Here below.
Sorry, Toby. Doesn't it beg the question though, Toby, that once you have these changes, wouldn't it mess up their calculations mathematically because you are having to account for them, but they're not? They just keep it steady. I don't know. That's kind of weird.
Wait, what's that?
When they have a calculation for it to be in a specific point based upon their calculations, but there's so many variables that would like throw that off. Why are they not like throwing that into their calculation? They just kind of like bypass that and wave past it. They wave past it to make it make sense for their own calculation, but technically there should be like a variable that throws that off. No,
Yeah,
am I wrong?
that's the
Yeah.
point that Brenner's getting to.
Yeah.
You should probably just let him read it instead of trying.
I'm sorry.
Because that's right.
You're
I
right, my
mean,
bad.
in your defense, it's like you're rightfully being like, well, hold on, like they're missing something here.
Right?
Like
I'm
there's,
just saying.
I can understand where you're coming from, but yeah, let's keep reading. So here below a diagram that Steve Spielman sent me in way of making fun of me. But thanks, Steve. This is exactly what happens on top of that parabola on a powered flight. Blue arrow down is G equals 9.8 meters per second squared. And the red up arrow is acceleration equals velocity squared over R, which would, I guess, would be the radius of the parabola in this case. Result is 0 effective gravity. And R in this case is the distance. Okay, here we go. The distance to the instant center of rotation. In nature, there is either rectilinear motion or circular motion. So no other options are available. Any motion along a random curve is made up of instant circular rotations around the so-called instant center of rotation. So here's the parabola. And here's showing the, I guess, why the forces are the way they are here. Actually, would all that take place over a curved surface of Earth instead of over a flat Earth? On top of that, an additional acceleration factor would attenuate gravity, so that now the equation would read v squared over r times c parabol plus v squared over r times Earth minus 9.8 equaling 0. If we leave out v squared over r Earth for a velocity of 100 meters or 100 meters per second as negligible with 0.0015 g, not for a rifle bullet rifle bullet though with 0.156 g and a railgun with 1.4 g. We can calculate the radius, the plane has to fly in order to achieve 0 G. And we do that with v squared over r minus 9.8 equaling 0. So r equals v squared over 9.8, and that's going to be 1020 meters, so 1020 meters. In order to give you a feeling for what is called lunar gravity of 0.16 Earth gravity, the plane would have to do a radius, r equals v squared over 0.16 times 9.8 equaling 6,377 meters. And for Martian gravity, the plane would have to fly a radius of this, equaling 2,685 meters, as per diagram above. That doesn't mean you are in free fall, though, because free fall means reducing distance to gravitational center, as well as converting potential into kinetic energy, none of which applies to the apex of this powered parabola. What you would experience is actual absence of gravity, i.e. what they call microgravity or reduced gravity, 0.16 G and 0.38 G respectively. So whenever you read or hear that 0 G planes are in free fall, you know it's wrong. It's called 0 G plane for a reason, not free fall plane, which would fall in full gravity, not zero. At 380 kilometers per hour through an atmosphere, a plane with airfoils like the A310 is not in free fall. L equals CQS equals CRU squared times S over 2, with L being the lift force, U being airspeed. So the lift force equals the lift coefficient times, where's Q? Yeah, so L is lift force, U is airspeed, S being wing area, R is the air density, C being the lift coefficient, and L only goes to 0 when either density, wing area, or airspeed goes to 0. Okay. None of which is the case here. Something totally different is a free fall parabola. Although to see this has proven to be the biggest hurdle for most Korans on here. So other people that answer questions. Essentially, those who claim to be top-tier scientists. A free fall parabola, a projectile trajectory, is a trace, not a stack. It leaves behind a parabolic trace with respect to a stationary backdrop. But the projectile never performs a parabola. What the projectile performs are two independent rectilinear motions. A first derivative motion, horizontal, and a second derivative motion, vertical. So there you go.
Is that drastic change? How do they try to compilate that to represent the
Who's
sphere?
copulating?
How do they do that? What's how do they do that?
Maybe he'll explain it here.
Okay.
Both these motions are dynamically indistinguishable from. So real quick, what he is saying here is that you just have two derivatives, two measures of the change over time across two different dynamic forces essentially. So both these motions are dynamically indistinguishable from being at rest. That means a cannonball, after leaving the muzzle in an air-free, dark environment without any reference to its environment, believes it's at rest. It would have no sense of motion whatsoever. And when ground hits, well, then it'll be surprised, but will swear it was the ground that hit it, not the other way around. Being indistinguishable from rest means that these motions cannot be attributed to the application of a force. And that shows us that free fall is not forced. It is free from force, as the title says. Actually, it's
Right, free fall.
What's that?
What does that mean?
Oh,
Oh my
sorry.
God.
You're good. Actually, it's the opposite. It's the erasure of force. Imagine a balloon with two small styrofoam balls attached on opposite sides. Now imagine you don't see the balloon and someone lets the air out. You would conclude from what you see that these two styrofoam balls are attracting each other, that there must be a force acting between them, an attraction of sorts, when in reality the space between them collapses and they are just following. You'd have to put up a force to inflate the balloon via F equals PA, like you have to put up a force to lift an object. But once you let go, the deflating of the balloon is actually the erasure of that force. This is gravity, the erasure of force, the collapse of space into the incommensurable counter space between two objects. This can be made visible under the ferrocell, where we see the little dark opening between the bigger black spots, the magnets. This central dot is the opening into counter space into which the field lines collapse while the magnets are moving towards each other. Nothing attracts each other. Everything just follows the path to ultimate rest, inertia, as the wisest of old already knew. That a freefall parabola has no angularity is easily shown here with a guy jumping on a trampoline while the trampoline is moving. Huh, sure, we'll watch this. That's crazy. All right. The guy does not, to his knowledge, perform a parabola. He does so only with respect to the background, which, with respect to himself, he only jumps up and down, and that's why, dynamically, he doesn't perform the dark blue arrow in the diagram below. He only performs the gray ones independently. So yeah, just the gray arrows, just gray arrows.
Everything about this is like XYZ though, right? Like correct me if I'm wrong. Yes or no? This whole diagram they just posted is XYZ. Has nothing to do with like anything beyond the curvature, right? Am I wrong?
He's just talking about forces and motion and the parabolic motion of orbit, essentially.
On an XYZ.
I
Is there? It's like it's still on an XYZ, which is a planar Earth.
Cartesian's totally fine, dude. I don't know.
Right. My bad.
I disagree with his statement about how he doesn't follow the blue arrows, though.
Sorry, Shane.
I think that relative to the ground, he does indeed follow those blue arrows, and it is
Relative
because
to the ground,
tractor
but he's
is
saying
moving.
relative to the trampoline frame.
Exactly, and because it is moving, he is following the blue arrows.
Well, and he does
and
say he
again,
does
it's a question
so-
of reference.
He does say he does
Indeed.
so only with respect to the background.
Indeed, it's about reference. And if you're standing there looking at the ground or standing on the ground watching the whole thing happen, he'll be doing the blue arrows.
True.
And you're right, for his perspective, he's just doing the gray Y's. All he's doing is Y.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. XYZ. That's all they're
Yeah.
whole, like your little diagram.
But only from his own perspective.
Right. Exactly. It's perspective of XYZ. Yeah. Exactly.
This is all Newton's bucket.
Okay, let's keep going here. It is this independency which has proven to be the biggest problem for so many to digest, which does not allow and does not justify the Newtonian continuum from cannonball thought experiment to moon orbit. To repeat, a cannonball after leaving the muzzle falls immediately with an increasing velocity v equals gt, and only a nullification of g can make this a zero, and thus distance to the ground constant. Such nullification can only happen if gravity on its own can pull a zero-g plane trick on the cannonball. So far, nobody has tested that and shown that it can. P.S. I have written many answers concerning Newtonian mechanics. Ain't that the truth? Ballistics in orbits, which garnered hundreds of comments. Some of them very instructive in the way the Newton mind entrapment works. Here, the latest comment by Tim Good illustrates that point better than any. He proudly demonstrates how ballistics and Newton orbital mechanics coincide down to the 7th decimal point, which he takes as argument for the veracity of Newton's claim that the mere power increase of a ballistic throw will eventually lead to orbit. He doesn't realize that he's fallen for a simple semantics trick, conflating in 1 second with in the first second. Ballistics gives the same result as orbital. That's the crux of it right there. Ballistics give the same result. So yeah, what I mean by that is just they take that motion that happens when the projectile starts. They take that first bit of motion and they act like it is, because it was observed, that we can assume that it's a dynamic force that can be repeated and observed. But it's just the current forces within that, within the first second, not there's not like a constant force there. It's just what you're observing in that first second. So ballistics gives the same result as orbital mechanics, only in the first second, because the square of 1 is still 1. D equals 0.5 gt squared equals 0.5 g for t equals 1. And in Newton's, so that for 1 second, and in Newton's case of the derivation of the moon orbit, it is forced to give the same result because Newton defined it to be so. Now, how far would we expect the moon to fall if it was acted upon by the same force that makes apples fall? The moon is 60 times as far from the center of the earth as the apple. Let us suppose that the earth attracts the apple as if all the mass were concentrated at the center. Then we would expect the force on the moon to be smaller by a factor of 60 squared, which is 3,600. We know that the apple falls 1/2 gt squared equals g over 2 feet on Earth. Since g equals 32, that is 16 feet or 192 inches. If g goes down by a factor of 3,600, the moon should fall 0.053 inches in 1 second, 1/20th of an inch. As Newton said, the two calculations answer pretty nearly. Wait, so that's crazy. What did we just do? Did we just make gravity?
We
just
applied-
made
We
made
applied
it
1/3600th of a gravitational force to the moon.
and we made it constant. How do we get off with just swapping a constant in there? Shouldn't it be an accelerative force?
You mean shouldn't it have an inverse relationship?
No, he's saying right at the end, he says 0.53 inches in 1 second. And he's trying to insinuate that it's going to also be per second. And it's not. It's just the first second, or however you want to think of that. You know what I mean? This is what he was talking about with the conflation.
That is what he's talking about there. And that's the trick, right? Is we go from talking about it as an accelerative force to all of a sudden we just start swapping some constants in. What? Cool. All right, so yeah, it is. All right, let's keep going here. But as I've shown in the rebuttal of his argument, ballistic math gives a vastly different result from orbital math, proving that it is not the continuation, or that one is not the continuation of the other, but instead invoking a completely different domain of physics. Ballistics is free fall physics, whereas orbital mechanics is hammer throw physics. Here is how people are when they parrot science Sunday school sermons instead of looking at what they have in front of them. A simple ballistics example of a rifle bullet exiting the muzzle with V equals 1,000 meters per second from an elevation of 1,000 meters, range would be to the claimed 7th decimal point. S equals VT, equaling V times the square root of 2H over G. And that's going to equal 14,285.7142857 meters. Now, applying orbital mechanics, which good claims must lead to this, Now, applying orbital mechanics, which good claims. What? I don't understand this sentence. Now, applying orbital
It's the
mechanics.
name of the guy who posted.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, applying orbital mechanics, which good claims must lead to the same result. S equals VT equals V times the square root of 2H over G minus V squared over R, equaling 14,433.756727 meters. You see that we are not even talking about decimal points. We are talking about a difference of 3 digits before the decimal point. That is a 10-digit difference between the claim and reality. Here is what Feynman says about such mathematical shenanigans. We're not going to read all of this, I don't think. Let's just read around the highlights. Let us ask, what is the meaning of the physical laws of Newton, which we write as F equals ma? A pleasant way to define that, let's go back a little bit. Suppose we have a law which says that the conservation of momentum is valid if the sum of all forces is 0. Then the question arises, what does it mean that the sum of all external forces is 0? A pleasant way to define that statement would be, when the total momentum is a constant, then the sum of the external forces is 0. There must be something wrong with that, because it is not just saying because it is just not saying anything new. If we have discovered a fundamental law which asserts that the force is equal to the mass times the acceleration, and then define the force to be the mass times acceleration, we have found out nothing. We could also define force to mean that a moving object with no force acting on it continues to move with constant velocity in a straight line. If we then observe an object not moving in a straight line with a constant velocity, we might say there is a force on it. Now, such things certainly cannot be the content of physics, because they are definitions going in a circle. The Newtonian statement above, however, seems to be a most precise definition of force, and one that appeals to the mathematician. Nevertheless, it is completely useless, because no prediction whatsoever can be made from a definition. One might sit in an armchair all day long and define words at will, but to find out what happens when two balls push against each other, or when a weight is hung on a spring, is another matter altogether, because the way the bodies behave is something completely outside any choice of definitions. And here is what Heisenberg says about similar problems with relativity theory and quantum theory. The impact of quantum theory and relativity theory on the minds of those scholars who helped found them during the first half of our century is conceivably such that they are imprisoned by these theories and thus cannot help but reason comfortably. That is, in terms of traditional concepts, whereas the need is for a whole revolution of thought, which can only be carried through by nonconformists. Mercier, 1971, shout out Ether Cosmology. Pat my own back, pat our own back. PS2. After dozens of more comments desperately trying to circumnavigate the problem, here's the synopsis of arguments in one diagram. Horizontally launched projectiles. A horizontally launched projectile is a projectile launched with only horizontal speed. Its initial velocity speed is 0. Since the only force acting on the projectile is gravity, which is in the vertical downward direction, only the vertical motion is affected. Gravity causes a downward acceleration. The cannonball falls the same amount of distance as it did when it was merely dropped from rest. So yeah, we already looked at this earlier. The only sawtooth path is claimed to be the principle on which orbits are based, as opposed to and not as following from cannonball ballistics. The dashed blue line is the path of a cannonball. Would it follow orbital mechanics? The argument that it is that would be more precise, because it is claimed that a cannonball in reality does an elliptical orbit cut short by Earth. And finally, everyday terrestrial reality as observed since before Newton and taught in every school, free fall trajectories as two independent rectilinear motions sharing the same time. Projectile motion. Projectile, object that is launched, thrown, or fired in the air that is in a state of free fall. Trajectory. The path the projectile follows. Projectile motion is described in terms of position, velocity, and acceleration. The horizontal and vertical components of velocities are independent of each other. Orbits are fantasy. Yeah, and another one of his he has indeed done a lot of questions and answers on this. And it's like one way I've heard him kind of put it before is he kept going on and on. He did a good job here of talking about there's the projectile force, right? There's free fall, and then there's the force of motion of the projectile, the trajectory of the projectile. And he talks about how they take these two dynamic forces and instead they take that motion for that certain moment in time, and then they just ascribe that to orbital paths, kinematics in the sky. It's like they give it a dynamic force. It's literally a rotational force that they give it, which is just really just kind of incoherent.
Excellent read.
Yeah, no, they do. That's what people believe, man. And not only believe, but they argue with. Go read the comments on that. It's gonna be. Let's just take a peek. Geez, what an unruly pile of "I'm very confused"isms. Let's take a look. Why do you keep repeating the same long screed, but refuse to even attempt to understand why Newton's laws match all this perfectly? Lots and lots of words, but you still haven't addressed the point from our last conversation. If you take into account the Earth's curvature by your own figures for the same amount of object... No, this one's actually kind of interesting. Let's see what he said. Oh, he hasn't replied to this one. 7 months. Uh-oh. I wonder if they had a back and forth already before. They must have. He is not very deep in these comments on this one so far. Oh, look who it is! Hey, Michael, longtime fan of your work here on Quora. I've even made one page. Whoa, look at this. Look at this fan.
Dude, are we about to read a Dave comp?
Dave Comp, BYODC.
This is when I first reached out to him, right here.
This is awesome.
Nice.
That's funny that it was this one.
Are we going to delve deep into some new perspective lore?
We won't do that. We won't put him on the spot.
That's fine. I don't care.
You guys want to go read it? Go read it. We have been in contact with him. We've been trying to get him to come on here to chat with us.
Yep.
I want tomorrow, if Alan's free, I want you to do a presentation on the history of new perspectives online postings.
Will do.
Haha, that would be a long episode.
I've been going through his Reddit history for weeks.
I'm not on Reddit.
December the 20th, 2020, Dave posted this.
We could listen to how I railed into Franco last night. Actually, I recorded.
How about that? What is the universe? Did you want to read that for us?
Yo, real quick though, before we read What is the Universe, how about we take a quick intermission to listen to Stone's new drop, dog?
Oh.
Because there's some people that haven't heard it, and I think they need to.
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
Right.
Definitely down. Someone else is gonna have to share.
Yeah.
Yep.
And sorry, I'm late to class, guys. I brought a note.
Oh, nice.
Actually, no. The truth is, I was actually finishing my latest video on Google Earth.
Oh, so you have something for us to hear too?
The good old graticule.
I'm thinking we might want to meet at another time for that one. I don't want to derail the program for tonight.
All right.
Do I need
Beyond
to
this
stretch?
tune, of course.
Do I need to stretch or warm up before Stone's latest drop?
All right. Yep, we're about to play it right now. So whenever you
Yeah, you
guys
should
are
stretch.
ready.
Yes.
I'll take a stretch.
Yep. All right, here we go.
Booyah.
Hey, these would be the same lyrics that.
Hey, NASA liars, you just think your globe's so pretty. I'm 100 miles away, but I still clearly see that city. How about you? Does math explain this? I want proof, not some old goof. FE deniers, don't you worry about the distance. I can see you there across the lake while laser pointers glisten. Use your eyes. Just hear my words, see through the lies. Might be surprised. Globe, no way could it be. No controlling how we think. Stop your lying through your teeth. No, it looks quite flat to me. Appears quite flat to me. Hey, NASA liars, your deception spread so far. We all believed your lies 'cause we were young, but now we've seen the water. You're no good. Just believe because we should. Wicked brotherhood. Hey, NASA liars, I've got so much left to say, but does it matter that I say to you, gas pressure is contained if there at all? With gravity, it does not fall, it fills it all. Globe, no way could it be. No controlling how we think. Stop your lying through your teeth. No, it looks quite flat to me. 100 miles, it's all the same, and we've got pictures from jet planes, and where is all the curvature they claim? Our friends are making fun of us, and we'll just laugh along because we know the truth no matter what they say. The liars, they made fools of us, the tinfoil has been left to rust, and now the world will never be the same. Let's end the game. Hey, you know they're no good, and I know they won't trick me like they did for years and years before, and I'll be asking them to prove their claim. Now things will never be the same. It's time to beat them at their game. Yeah, NASA lies to me and you. You know it's true. Globe, no way could it be. No controlling how we think. Stop your lying through your teeth. No, it looks quite flat to me. Appears quite flat to me. Fake globe. Fake globe. Fake globe.
Woo! Woo!
Yeah, well, yeah, who, yeah, son of a man, well, yeah.
That was great. That was awesome. That was fucking
Thanks,
awesome.
man. Yeah,
Perfect
I wanna
little
see-
intermission there. What's
I
that
want to
sound?
see thousands of views. You know what I mean? Just rack them up. Show it to everybody.
That's right.
Yeah, all right. So we're going to read fictitious forces now, I think. Or what are fake forces?
I thought we were going to
Right.
do what is the universe.
Oh,
I would even
sorry.
volunteer for some.
No, I totally blacked
No,
out
please
there.
go ahead. I'm at storage. I go ahead and do yours first. I think I might pick a different one anyway.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Let's see. Change. This looks like a Brenner comp.
This is like New Perspectives' dream, huh?
Oh, dude, he loves BYOBC.
He's loving it. He's loving it.
It wasn't my
Bring
idea
your
to,
own Brenner.
to do this, by
Yeah.
the way. This is other Brenner fans made by you actually, Witsit, because I looked up Counterspace listening to you and found Brenner that way.
That's funny.
All right. So here we have, let me get this centered. All right. So here we have Michael Brenner. Fake forces are the product of fake physics. That's just as simple as that. Everything that is pseudo, fictitious, virtual, imaginary, dark, or black, i.e., scientifically inaccessible, etc., is fake physics. How can one pull off to fake physics? Could you ask? Well, obviously, only if lying becomes a dedicated and accepted practice in science and education, and not in man. 1 second. All right. And not any lying about the specific lying to children, because it is their trustful, innocent minds where you have to plant the fake physics for it to take, to take root. Now, Io and behold, that is
Lo and behold.
Thank you. Now, lo and behold, that is exactly how it happens. And there is, man, I can't read tonight, guys.
I got you, bro. This is exactly how it happens, and here's where we explore this scheme. On Quora specifically, S. Spielman and T. Heil vociferously defend the concept of lying to children as an accepted routine in education where you use a simplified explanation of technical or complex subjects as a teaching method for children and lay people. Sounds like Brian Greene. That may sound innocent enough, but once you have introduced the word lying as legitimate, who is to tell what is a simplification and what is actually a lie? The kids, a layperson's. Hold that thought to the end of the article. Nowhere is this practice more obvious than in the treatment of centrifugal force, because an understanding of the actual physics of centrifugality, that's good, would cause the immediate collapse of the Copernican cosmology, which is based on a total neglect of the dynamics of massive bodies. Neither Copernicus nor Kepler or even Newton, come on, Brenner, applied the laws of dynamics to orbits. Although Newton should have known better, and in private letters did know better, they all treated it purely on the basis of geometry and kinematics, which do not include masses and forces. Here for the umpteenth time, because it is as important as it is neglected. Geometry, the branch of mathematics concerned with the properties and relations of points, lines, surfaces, solids, and higher dimensional analogues. Kinematics, the branch of mechanics concerned with the motion of objects without reference to the forces which cause the motion. Dynamics, the branch of mechanics concerned with the motion of bodies under the action of forces. First in a row of lies to children is that a Newtonian force is taught as being an external contact force when something violent happens, as in the video below, and such contact force is not found. They call it fake force, because force it must be, because harm has been done, and no force, no harm. But how can something fake cause harm? Let's have a look at an article which takes this very video as a basis to talk about fake force. And there you go with the round of death. Crazy. What a great idea. If you can't spin a merry-go-round just with your feet, put your scooter on it. Merry-go-rounds are on their way out of parks anyways. This will just hasten their unfortunate demise although I can spin any more now that I'm older. Just to be clear, don't do this stunt. I noticed that most of the videos end with a person flying off the merry-go-round. So the question, how hard is it to hang on? How fast do these things spin anyways? So, what's a fake force? Why is it useful in this case? First thing about a force is an interaction between two objects, like the Earth and me pulling on each other. Or a magnet and an iron nail pulling on each other. And what does a force do to an object? A net force changes the momentum of that object. Most people call this Newton's second law, and it can be written as the force net vector is the change in, and the delta, all that cool stuff. FMA, woo-ha. The author of this article has fallen for the lying to children scheme and never recovered from it because he trusts that teachers have taught him right. Well, they haven't. While teachers on their side trust that their pupils will never go and study Newton's laws on their own behind their backs, so to say. Here's Newton's Def 3 in his Principia. The vis insita, or innate force of matter, is a power of resisting by which every body, as much as in it lies, continues in its present state, whether it be a rest or a moving uniformly forwards in a right line. I guess straight would also be synonymous. And here is his definition 4. The vis impressed force is an action exerted upon a body in order to change its state, either of rest or of uniform motion in a right line. This means that any impressed force, that is, any contact force, is a secondary mirror image of the vis insita, the innate force of matter to resist, which therefore is not a fake force, but the only and primary real force which can kill you immediately given the right circumstances. The article continues, and this is where fake forces come in. Fake forces are not interactions between two objects. Instead, they are make-believe forces that we need in order to make objects in an accelerating frame behave as though they were in a non-accelerating frame. Fake forces let us use Newtonian mechanics in a place where it doesn't really work. Of course, even the so-called fake forces are interactions between two bodies. There are no mechanic forces other than interactive forces. There are no unilateral forces, and therefore Newton very much works in accelerating frames once you understand that in the case of the merry-go-round, you are the one interacting. You are the force. But that reality completely shatters any orbital fantasies because orbits are accelerated frames by nature of being circular. Here the article continues with the classic turning car deception. Everyone has experienced these fake forces. Here you are, in a moving car. The car turns to the left, and what happens? You get pushed to the right side of the car. Now, what force was it that pushed you? Or better yet, what object interacted with you? Surprise, there was no object pushing you that way. You want to say there is a force even when there isn't one. This is the essence of the fake force. In general, the fake force can be written as, the fake force equals negative ma of the frame. You are the physically real fake force. You are interacting with the right side of the car. You are breaking the car window when you are thrown out. The car window doesn't break itself. But that is what is insinuated because only one real force is postulated here and an utterly anti-Newtonian concept to begin with. And he continues his fake tour of the force. So why does he fly out? Let me draw a force diagram for the guy as he is about to fly out. From his point of view, if he is going to stay on this merry-go-round, all of these forces, including the fake one, have to add up to the zero vector. The problem is that as his center of mass moves away from the center of the merry-go-round, the fake forces get larger. How much larger? Well, the fake force depends on his mass. Suppose he has a mass of 70 keys, then as he changes his radius, the force would look like this, and we're looking at a straight up slope. Wonderful. Here we have a diagram showing a fake force with a real value, and it's huge. As we can read in the continuation, you can see now how things get out of control. The forces are, huge. His weight is around 700 newtons. Even at just a radius of half a meter, the fake force is over 2,500 newtons, which is 560 pounds. This is what we in physics call a seriously large fake force. And take the S out, man. When he leans back just a bit, the fake force gets even larger. This causes him to lean back just a bit more, and wham, things get out of control. Next thing he knows, he's on the ground. Let that sink in. How brainwashed does one need to be as grown up in order to be able to pronounce the sentence, this is what we call in physics as seriously large fake force, in front of a class of children without spitting his morning coffee all over the lectern? Okay, here's another one, even better and more illustrative than the above. The Physics Classroom, a site aimed at bringing state-of-the-art physics tutorials to young people online. Starting out with a geometric proof of inward acceleration. Okay, to understand this at a deeper level, we'll have to combine the definition of acceleration with a review of some basic vector principles. Recall from Unit 1, acceleration as a quantity was defined as the rate at which the velocity of an object changes. As such, it is calculated using the following equation, and it's the same old one, v2 minus v1 over t, where v1 represents the initial velocity, vt represents the final velocity after some time of t. The numerator of the equation is found by subtracting one vector, vi, or v1, I guess, from second vector, vt, but the addition and subtraction of vectors from each other is done in a manner much different than the addition and subtraction of scalar quantities. Consider the case of an object moving in a circle about point C, as shown in the diagram below. In a time of t seconds, the object has moved from point A to point B, and this time the velocity has changed from vi to vt. The process of subtracting vi from vt is shown in the vector diagram. This process yields the change in velocity. Okay, pay attention to the subtlety of the deception. The word proof is emphasized in italics, when in fact the word geometric should be, because it doesn't involve forces and masses. It's not dynamics, it's geometry. A branch of math is unrelated to the physical reality of moving bodies. The geometric aspect is bound to be centripetal, because a tangent following a circle necessarily bends inwards, but that does not tell you anything at all about how a massive body forced around a circle would behave. You have to do real physics, and that is real experiments with masses in order to find that out. In other words, you have to study dynamics, something none of the fathers of modern cosmology, Copernicus, Kepler, Newton, have ever done. And here in the following paragraph, we catch our teachers in the act of lying to children red-handed by using faked experiments to lead children into a quagmire of nonsense from which they will never recover. Intellectual damnation. Okay, direction of the acceleration vector. Do you want me to read this one too? This is harsh.
You don't have to.
Note in the diagram above. Hold on a second here. I can take some of it. Note in the diagram above, there's a velocity change for an object moving in a circle with a constant speed. A careful inspection of the velocity change vector in the above diagram shows that it points down and to the left. At the midpoint along the arc connecting point A and B, the velocity change is directed to point C, the center of the circle. The acceleration of the object is dependent on this velocity change and is in the same direction as this velocity change. The acceleration of the object is in the same direction as the velocity change vector. The acceleration is directed towards point C as well, the center of the circle. Objects moving in circles at a constant speed accelerate towards the center of the circle. The acceleration of an object is often measured using a device known as an accelerometer. Oh, the irony. A simple accelerometer consists of an object immersed in a fluid such as water. Consider a sealed jar that is filled with water. A cork attached to the lid by a string can serve as an accelerometer. To test the direction of acceleration for an object moving in a circle, the jar can be inverted and attached to the end of a short section of wood, like 2x4. A second accelerometer constructed in the same manner can be attached to the opposite end of the 2x4. If the 2x4 and accelerometers are clamped to a rotating platform and spun in a circle, the direction of the acceleration can clearly be seen by the direction of the lean of the corks. As the cork-water combination spins in a circle, the cork leans towards the center of the circle. The least massive of the two objects always leans in the direction of the acceleration. In the case of the cork in the water, the cork is less massive on a per milliliter basis and thus experiences a greater acceleration. Having less inertia owing to its smaller mass on a per milliliter basis, the cork resists the acceleration the least and thus leans to the inside of the jar towards the center of the circle. This is observable evidence that an object moving in circular motion at constant speed experiences an acceleration that is directed towards the center of the circle. All right, here we see a description. Okay, back up. One paragraph. One more. One more. There we go. Here we see a description of a simple accelerometer where it's falsely stated that the least massive of the two objects always leans in the direction of the acceleration. In the case of the cork and the water, the cork is less massive on a per mil basis, and thus it experiences the greater acceleration. Having less inertia owing to its smaller mass on a per mil, the cork resists the acceleration the least and thus leans to the inside of the jar towards the center of the circle. This is observable evidence that an object moving in circular motion at a constant speed experiences an acceleration that is directed towards the center of the circle. Quote, this is such a hideous heap of gobbledygook, one really wonders how grown-ups can pronounce it without short-circuiting their brains. The least massive object tends to move opposite of the acceleration and not, as is claimed, in the direction of the acceleration. Water has more pressure in direction of acceleration, and thus a cork wants to move against that pressure gradient and rise to the surface. In a centrifuge, like in this experiment, the acceleration is, of course, centrifugal and produces a pressure gradient in the water towards the outside of the jar against which the cork rises. But the acceleration as a result of the rotation is, of course, centrifugal and not centripetal as falsely taught here in a classroom for children. The cork, as the less massive object, clearly tells where the acceleration is pointed, and that is away from the center of rotation, which is centrifugal. And it not only continues in the same vein, it gets even more hideous. And I'll leave somebody else to read this fine print. This is going good, guys. Someone jump in there, if you can.
You want me to read the small print there?
There you go for it. Yeah, start in there.
Let's see. Another simple homemade accelerometer involves a lit candle centered vertically in the middle of an open air glass. If the glass is held level and at rest, such that there is no acceleration, then the candle flame extends in an upward direction. However, if you hold the glass candle system with an outstretched arm and spin in a circle at a constant rate, such that the flame experiences an acceleration, then the candle flame will no longer extend vertically upwards. Instead, the flame deflects from its upright position. This signifies that there is an acceleration when the flame moves in a circular path at a constant speed. The deflection of the flame will be in the direction of the acceleration. This can be explained by asserting that the hot gases of the flame are less massive on a per mil basis and thus have less inertia than the cooler gases that surround it. Subsequently, the hotter and lighter gases of the flame experience the greater acceleration and will lean in the direction of the acceleration. A careful examination of the flame reveals that the flame will point towards the center of the circle, thus indicating that not only is there an acceleration, but that there is an inward acceleration. This is one more piece of observable evidence that indicates that objects moving in a circle at a constant speed experience an acceleration that is directed towards the center of the circle.
Awesome. We know for a fact that flames move upward because of hot air having less density, which is acknowledged here, but then, like cup shufflers tricking peasants coming into a town fair, it's claimed that hot air is accelerated downward, pointing in direction of acceleration, when in fact the opposite is true. When rotating the jar, the air is not densest at the bottom anymore, but towards the outward rim of the jar, and the flame rises in the direction of the density gradient, which now is not down up anymore, but leaning outside in. An outside in density gradient is a clear and unmistakable sign of outward acceleration. So these two experiments unequivocally prove the opposite of what is claimed, namely a centrifugal acceleration as the result of rotation. Now, there's something very interesting happening at the end of this physics classroom, a psychological trick that makes the children responsible for their own deception, thus reinforcing the deception themselves by first presenting to them that proofs have been given, and then let the children by themselves decide whether this is true or not, asking if they can think of something else, or even an outward acceleration as seemingly the most absurd alternative. Tag.
So
Go, Toby.
thus far,
There.
we have seen a geometric proof and 2 real-world demonstrations of this inward acceleration. At this point, it becomes the decision of the student to believe or to not believe. It is sensible that an object moving in a circle experiences an acceleration that is directed towards the center of this, or is it sensible that an object moving in a circle experiences an acceleration that is directed towards the center of the circle? Can you think of a logical reason to believe in, say, no acceleration or even an outward acceleration experienced by an object moving in uniform circular motion? In the next part of Lesson 1, additional logical evidence will be presented to support the notion of an inward force for an object moving in circular motion.
That's awesome, considering they haven't presented any logical evidence yet. This is how you install... This is how you install fake physics in the minds of children and make it stick with what seems to be observable demonstrations. This goes for the entirety of physics you've been taught, where it is proudly claimed that it matches observation, when in fact it is the opposite of what is observed, like the movement of the corks or flames in the above experiment. This leads to quite a desperate situation which cannot but be acknowledged even by physicists on the highest echelons. One of the key worries I have as a cosmologist right now is that we have these ideas and these parameters, and every experiment is consistent with this picture, and yet nothing points to the fundamental physics beneath it. Lawrence Krauss, oh man. Of course it doesn't. If you deceive yourself constantly by interpreting what you observe, following the guidelines of a catechism instead of reasoning according to nature, who simply doesn't care what is fashionable at the moment, and at the moment it is fashionable to have a gravitationally orbiting cosmology, something nature simply doesn't do. Nature does everything electrically, not gravitationally, and we know that. We just don't accept it yet. Postscript, as is so often the case, comments prompt a clarifying addendum. Here, a wonderful example of how to scam innocent young students by picking and choosing what supports your agenda instead of teaching the underlying physics. 2 balloons in a car, 1 helium, 1 filled with air, point in opposite directions. So now what? According to physics classroom tutorial, acceleration is the direction of the cork. Here are the balloons, but what's going on here in this left-turning car? Balloons pointing in the opposite directions? Does that indicate opposite accelerations? No, of course not. They both indicate centrifugal acceleration, one direct and one indirect. The orange one indirect by moving towards less dense air, rising sideways, so to speak, and the yellow one moving in the direction of acceleration, falling sideways, so to speak. In any case, both represent the underlying physics of centrifugal acceleration. If you would choose a heavier than water object hanging in the glass jars instead of the corks, they would move in the outward experiment, but that would look too much like outward acceleration, which it is, of course, and that is not desired because the notion of a real centrifugal force must be erased in order to keep orbital fantasies alive. Booyah.
GG. Thank you, Stone. Appreciate that.
Dang, I stepped in last minute, but yeah, centrifugal force is like the freaking lethal blow to their orbits. I missed it. I'll have to. Are we live?
Yep.
Okay, I'll listen back.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was fantastic reading, Stone. Thank you. So yeah, anyone else want to read? Anyone else bring their own Brenner comp?
No, I'm not cool.
Dude, you didn't
I will read in a sec.
BC?
Thanks, man. Alan, your mic's a bit low today.
Yes, indeed.
Is it? How's
You're
it
roboting,
sound?
Dave. What's up?
Oh, bad.
You there?
Pretty good, Alan. Yeah, Dave's roboting.
Yeah, Dave, you're roboting real bad.
Yeah, my bad. I think I have my mic in the opposite direction of motion.
Oh.
It's centripetally oriented, Mike. Yeah.
Yep.
Fictional Mike.
Yep.
Well, cool. Let's see if I can find another here while we wait for Dave.
Pull another present out from under the tree.
Yo, pull an ether one. I'll read it.
Okay. Let's see here.
Cool.
Let's see here. What is alchemy? Da, da, da.
Yeah, I don't have any.
Maui Fire Star.
I don't have any Brenner ether stuff.
Here, let me.
Oh wait, no, I do. Here we go.
He's got good stuff.
I got
you got one?
Yeah.
Nice.
So
What do we got? What is this one called?
this is called "Does Ether Exist According to Modern Physics" by
Oh, I
Michael
think-
Brenner.
Hell yeah.
That's the one that Stone read.
Oh, is it?
Pretty sure.
Yeah,
And shoot.
that's the
Well, I
one.
mean,
read.
it's all good. I mean, like, I'm about to walk upstairs in a sec. Whatever you guys think.
It is a
should be done,
hit.
okay.
I don't know, man.
I think so too. I read some good stuff on the ether by him.
We should try. He's got other ones about ether for sure. Or any of his ones about like magnetism. Well, he doesn't have that many about magnetism actually. Oh, here, let me show my screen. Yeah. So there's that one.
New.
There is How Do Magnets Work. Did we ever read that one? We might have read that one as well.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. But then it's all Brenner theme. They all sound familiar, you know.
So how does this work? You guys are dropping links, and then that person shares their screen, or there's one person sharing screen and follows along, or what?
Any of the above? Typically, people either share their screen and read, or if they're unable to, then one of us will share our screen and scroll along.
Okay. All right, I'm at the computer now, so let's see here.
I feel like everything you guys are saying, it would be so awesome if a glober was listening to this right now. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, oh my god.
That's why we do these. Yeah, it's just lots and lots of gravy.
Well, we mustn't
Gravy, bro. Exactly.
we mustn't discount the possibility that they're secretly watching on the YouTube feed. You never know, man. You never know.
Yeah, there's got to be some hate watchers going for sure.
Dude, we got a couple regular physics lads that watch this. That yeah.
So can you?
What would be the consequences to physics if the ether was confirmed? How about that?
Sure.
Oh yeah, sure. That's right up Whitsid's alley.
Would all of a sudden make sense?
Do you want to read and scroll and share your screen, or you want
Yeah, I
me
can do
to
that. I
sit
can
there?
do that.
All right, cool. I just dropped the link in the chat then.
Oh.
I feel like quantum erasers should be listening. You know what I mean? Like, you feel me?
Should he though?
Oh wait, that's just or no, that's his answer. Good, yeah, that's it. Cool.
All right, I made it big for you guys, and that sucks. All right. I'm gonna have to back away from the computer or something. Oh my goodness.
You can scroll out a little bit.
Breathe it into your mic a little bit too.
Your monitors are just too big.
Are you guys live streaming like on X or something? Like,
Too right.
Yep, we're live right now.
yeah, good shit. Let everybody know this. You know what I mean? Let everybody hear this. I love it. Some gravy, bro.
All right. I'm skipping equations unless someone wants to jump in. All right, let me know if my breathing's bad, because I hate when people don't. So.
No, you're
Because I
fine
listen
now.
back. And I'm like,
Yeah, you're good now.
all right. So question. What would be the consequence to physics if the ether was confirmed? It's not a question or confirmation. Of confirmation. The ether has been confirmed over and over. It is a question about acceptance. When the ether will be accepted again, because it only has been temporarily ostracized by power monopolies. The world will be a different one, but not a weird new universe, as William Barnes says here. It will be a world with much less dictatorship, and especially a world without energy monopoly and bank corruption and manipulation. Here's about confirmation. James Clerk Maxwell, quote, "The medium of propagation, the ether, must exist. This medium must be a prominent thought in our investigations." When Einstein came around, the power monopoly has already ostracized ether, so Einstein, although claiming to base his theory on Maxwell, yields to the anti-ether PR, because science this is of course not, and writes his 1905 paper on the basis of media hearsay. Just let the following sink in for a while. Einstein, 1905. Quote, "In 1905, I was of the opinion that I was no longer allowed to speak about the ether in physics. This opinion, however, was too radical, as we will see later when we discuss the general theory of relativity." So this would not be Einstein in 1905. Would it? I mean, anyway, it does remain allowed, as always, to introduce a medium filling all space and to assume that the electromagnetic fields and matter as well are its states. Once again, quote, "empty space appears as endowed with physical properties, i.e., no longer as physically empty, as seemed to be the case according to special relativity. One can thus say that the ether is resurrected in the general theory of relativity. Since the new theory, metric facts can no longer be separated from the true physical facts, the concepts of space and ether have merged together." Ludwig Castro, Einstein the Ether, 2000. Oh, okay, very nice. Space is ether. What do you guys do? Just read it, or do you guys talk about it?
We can do both.
Well,
Both.
fully the latter. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Like, do you read it all then talk about it?
Oh no, right on the fly. Anything comes to mind.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So
it's when it
space
should
isn't
happen, yeah.
ether. I mean, space is counter space is what we call ether, right? And this is my opinion.
Precisely.
And when it says like space, like ether fills space, I don't think that's true. Again, because it's counter space, right? So it doesn't permeate through what we call space. It's like the polarization of what we call Cartesian space, in my opinion, right? So I don't know. Okay, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself though. Space is ether. Specifically, space is the magnetic part of ether polarization, the other being dielectricity representing counter space. Interesting. As special relativity is a theory that is not representing our world, it is based on the assumption of absence of gravity. General relativity, which wants to talk about our world, obviously needs to reintroduce ether, which could be done without in a theory detached from physical reality. Okay. Einstein, 1920. According to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable, for in such space there would not only be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for standards of space and time measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in the physical sense. And that's ether in the theory of relativity. 1920. It's funny, he points out specifically the propagation of light. Right? No technology operates on the basis of the negation of ether. The entire field of electrical engineering is nothing but the engineering of ether polarization. That people are unaware of that is just because schools are manipulated into teaching an etherless world. Oliver Heaviside and Charles Produce Steinmetz could be household names, but they aren't. Why? They are all of the fathers. They are, after all, the fathers of electrical engineering, and thus the fathers of our electrified civilization. They are kept in obscurity because they teach ether physics, and a broad awareness of the potential of the ether is the greatest threat to power monopolies who thrive on the control that is the scarcity of energy. Tesla hits this nail on the head when he points out the infinite energy reservoir that the ether represents. Tesla, quote, "Nature has stored up in the universe infinite energy. The eternal recipient and transmitter of this infinite energy is the ether. The recognition of the existence of ether and of the functions it performs is one of the most important results of scientific research." Of course, even modern physics and cosmology cannot do without the ether. It's just that they have to bend backwards in order to avoid any association with the concept of ether. It is hilarious to watch the garbled word creation stemming from this attitude. Quantum foam, vacuum energy, and whatnot. Totally nonsensical notions, whereas ether is an engineerable and verified physical reality. All ancient cosmologies and mythologies are applied ether physics. We just don't understand that anymore because math has taken over the field of science. In ancient times, science was done in spoken language, which you could relate to and transmit to the ordinary people. Modern, quote unquote, science is a secret cult using a language that is totally detached from physical reality as well as the intuitive understanding. Would physicists and mathematicians be forced to express their findings in spoken language, anyone would immediately recognize the scam that is perpetrated. That's pretty fire. That is such a great point. For instance, the term quote unquote speed of light, expressed mathematically as a factor of permittivity and permeability, is C equals 1 over the square root of something.
That's the electric constant and the magnetic constant.
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
mu and epsilon.
Yeah. Moo, like the Pokemon. When you put that in words, it reads, quote, speed of light is per square root of inductivity, which anyone would immediately recognize as garble. People would force physicists to reformulate until things make sense. So let's rewind a couple of mathematical steps until it starts making sense. Mu times ellipson. Wait, what is it?
Epsilon.
Yeah,
Epsilon. Like sounds like a salt. Equals 1.1265006 times 10 to the negative 17. Putting that into words reads as following. The conversion factor between magnetic and dielectric induction is that number. That makes sense. The concept of speed of light doesn't. Light is an induction process of a medium, not a projection through a medium. Bro, this guy's fire. Yeah. Einstein's field equation, which is worshipped as the God equation because of its mathematical appearance, also reads like a mantra from a Kabbalistic session when put into words. Who wants it? No one?
I got you, dog. So going
R
from
sub mu v minus 1/2 r g sub mu v plus, what is that, delta g of g sub mu
That's
v?
lambda.
That's lambda. Thank you. Lambda g sub mu v equals 8 pi g over c to the 4th t mu v.
Thank you, sir. This particular rendering came with the subtext, quote, it is beautiful, therefore it exists. That in itself is Kabbalistic, and where is the beauty? Number 8, for instance, looks awkward and contrived to be in principled equation, and when we pronounce in words what it says, quote, the effect is the cause of its cause, and the cause is the effect of its effect. All the beauty is gone. Dude, this is such a profound point. Like, make them read what their equations say in actual words, like make them say it in words.
Tangibles, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. Also, it doesn't take a PhD in philosophy to realize that this is logical insanity. Apart from the fact that Big G has no business to be here where there is only one mass, Big G comes from a Newtonian universe where there are a minimum of 2 masses, whereas this is an Einsteinian universe where there can only be 1 mass. We've seen already that Einstein was no stranger to talking about universes which aren't ours, something he shares with string theorists who mathematically fantasize about 10 to the 500th universes, one of which resembles ours. That's how detached mathematicians can get from reality. The totally unfounded and irrational abolishment of the ether has an interesting parallel with the total negation of anything culturally advanced associated with the Slavic people. This begins with death threats against a scholar who found out that Etruscan, butchered that, is very much readable the moment you understand it's a Slavic language. The Etruscans call themselves Razina, which is a well-known Slavic tribe, and their god Asir, which is also well-established Slavic. All our writing systems stem from the ancient Slavic runic system called Karuna, something that is, of course, completely off the record and forbidden knowledge. But once you study it, you realize these people understood everything about ether physics. When we look at their script arranged in a 9x16 matrix, we might as well look at a code system for a nuclear power plant. So technical does it come across. Here highlighted, we see two runes which represent pure ether polarization science as described by Maxwell, Heaviside, and Steinmetz. The one with the oval to the right of the middle line reads Yuga, with the other are with the meaning where time is. We know this from the Vedic Kali Yuga, for instance, where it represents a certain span of time. And the other, with the oval left of the middle line, reads Sva and means where time is not. Oh, dude, where time is not. Dude, that is wild.
That is graphically deep.
Dude, how crazy is that, bro? Wow. Where are we at here? Yeah. Representing counter space, which has no Cartesian location, no extension, and no duration. But it contains all the energy as potential, actually, because of it being pure potential. It contains an infinite amount of it. Dude, this dude's on point. Here once more, the quote from Tesla, which could have come verbatim from many thousand years ago in faraway Siberia, the homeland of the civilization called Belavodi, who created this writing system. Tesla, quote, nature has stored up in the universe infinite energy. We read that. The eternal recipient and transmitter of this infinite energy is the ether. The recognition of the existence of ether and of the function it performs is one of the most important results of scientific research. Once people realize that they are ether beings with infinite potential, repressive governments would lose their power as well as their meaning. Quote, in this world we would have no place anymore, says the general in the Celestian prophecies, and that would be the consequence if the ether were accepted, confirmed it has been for thousands of years. P.S. Here are more of Tesla's thoughts on Einstein's and his violation of basic accepted principles. Quote, supposing that the bodies act upon the surrounding space causing curving of the same, it appears to my simple mind that the curved spaces must react on the bodies and producing the opposite effects, straightening out the curves. Since action and reaction are coexistent, it follows that the supposed curvature of space is entirely impossible. But even if it existed, it would not explain the motions of the bodies as observed. Only the existence of a field of force can account for the motions of the bodies as observed, and its assumption dispenses with space curvature. Hubble, 1937, came to the same conclusion following his observation, quote, if the recession factor is dropped, if redshifts are not primarily velocity shifts, the picture is simple and plausible. There is no evidence of expansion and no restriction of the time scale, no trace of spatial curvature, and no limitation of spatial dimensions. Moreover, there is no problem of internebular matter, 1937. Dark matter.
That is cosmological Hakuna Matata right there.
And I guess these are the replies, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you guys think?
Fantastic. Thanks for reading.
Yeah.
You're right. Like he makes a lot of profound points. That's hilarious. Apparently you are the one that found him and showed him a new perspective, and then new perspective.
No. New perspective heard me say counterspace, found him, and then came and told me about him.
Oh. Gotcha.
And then I read him by proxy, meaning like he would come send me those big screenshot things, and I would try to set some time aside to read them. Yeah.
It's
he's
crazy. He's another one of those.
Go
ahead.
We're saying he's on point with a lot of things.
Yeah, it's crazy. He's another one of those sources where it's like, oh, look at another person that's doing their own independent research and coming to similar conclusions about tons of things as we are, like within his own independent research. It's pretty crazy to see. Pretty cool to see.
No, exactly. I would actually like to talk to him about what we disagree on, because that's what you're supposed to do, you know.
For sure.
I'm not sure what it is, but I did see a part up here, right? He says, space is ether. Specifically, space is the magnetic part of ether polarization. Okay, so I don't disagree with that. So what he's saying, because obviously space and counter space are both ether. And so when we say space is counter space, what we really mean is it's like its inertial state, right? Because like, okay, by space, he means like the realm in which we have dimensionality, like Cartesian coordinates, right? Like this, like perceivable physical world that we call 3D, right? Because that's like dimensions, Cartesian. You could be like X, Y, Z here, right? And so you can say like this realm inside of that, you can call that concept space or whatever, right? But space itself is not actually a thing, it's seemingly emptiness. So that's where it does kind of begin to like warp your mind in a way, right? Because it's like, yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. It's like
I see the word space as defining dimension and not substance, as terminology goes.
yeah,
Does that
exactly.
make
But then like
sense?
try to focus on the idea of, okay, so it's like you have counter space, and I would say that's like the inertial state, like the pure potential initial inertial state, the pure potential inertial state. And then like you kind of have it knocked out of that inertial state, and then you get what we have. So basically we would still be surrounded by counter space in that understanding. That's what I'm saying. That's the part that's like mind bending to me. Does that make sense? It's like the counter space would still be here. It would be like overlapped with
Mm.
this place, right? Like there would be no actual
Yeah.
space. Yeah.
It's
Space would
like
be
a
the
coexistence.
physicality.
It's a coexistence between the physical and the non-physical in the same physical space.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like literally like a quarter with two sides to it. So I
Well,
don't
it's
necessarily disagree with
interesting.
this.
There he says he says a polarization even, so that's that's
Yeah.
super interesting.
That's the part that's crazy. But that's where I was saying the other day in here, I think, where I was saying like I think the creator kind of made this place so fractal that everything's right there. And so like the magnetic field, which I would agree with Ken Willer, right? Like that's the only field of force. It's like you have the magnetic field, so you have the spatial extension. But then you have the hyperboloid, right? Like you have the conjugate expression, like that counter space, basically, or like that black hole portion. And so that would be like a miniaturized representation of the quote unquote universe, right? You have the magnetic field being this physical realm, then you have the ether in its initial state being the hyperboloid. Not literally in terms of shape, maybe, actually, I don't know, but like in terms of one has spatial extension, one doesn't, one's Cartesian, one is not. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I definitely do. And it's funny because I've been talking about this for a year and a half now, but I feel like we've like just been starting to really dig into this particular aspect of it, of the counter spatial aspect and what that really like means in a tangible, or well, never truly tangible, but in a meaningful way being attached to reality, you know?
Isn't it kind of crazy to think that we're shown like a little mini version of the orthographic like macro scale with a magnetic field, and that like the center of the magnetic field we see, there's just a big version of that in near the North Pole. And then even though you have the magnetic field and it extends out spatially, like the counter space or like the hyperboloid, it converges into the center, but it's not just in the center, right? Like the dielectric portion is still it's converging into the center, which means that all outside that field you have both sides of the coin. Imagine that being like the meta of where we
Mm.
are, like the macro of what we exist in. It's kind of
But
wild.
but I asked this though with it, like, is there a way to like quantize that? Because technically, in the scriptures, like he states, like you cannot know these measurements. So where do we find ourselves?
Oh, of the earth.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So where do we find ourselves trying to, you know, quantize these measurements if we are not able to, according to scriptures, know the true heights and the depths and the lengths? Like where do we stand on that? You know what I mean?
Well, I don't even consider that a goal of mine to know the dimensions of
Right, right.
the earth.
I think that's not even feasible. I mean, that comes to like you literally have to take to like La La Land of like just assuming and having this presumptuous position to like you can.
So like, I'm curious what you guys think,
What
and
happened there?
I don't know, but I'm curious what you guys think, and I'll fall back here. But like, I'm pretty adamantly opposed to the idea that ether permeates space. Like, I just don't think that's what's happening. I don't even think light permeates the ether. Like, I think that light is the ether. So I don't know if you guys agree or disagree. So in a sense, like, we use classical wave mechanics as if there's a medium with something external to that propagating through it. And that's certainly how it kind of presents itself to us. We're able to mathematically describe it, right? It makes a lot of sense. It works. But I don't think the light permeates the ether. And I don't think the ether permeates all of space. I think it is that, right? I think that, like, the matter is the ether, energy is the ether, light is the ether. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, yeah, that's why I like to invoke 7 dimensions when we talk about space and counter space, or physical and non-physical existing in the same unit space, volume space, if you depending on which way you want to look at it. That the ether itself to me represents an inverted polar unlimited voltage potential, not necessarily a power potential. It's a question of, polar whack-a-mole that we're playing with there. But no, that's why, like I said, I encourage people to think of it in terms of 7 dimensions, where you're literally moving from dimensions 1, 2, and 3 to 5, 6, and 7, leaving 4 as the time constant in the middle between them, kind of like the fence, graphically, if you want to think of it that way. But yeah, there is correlation in the same space, and that's how you see light propagation as one physically perturbing the other, causing an inductive effect in the same space.
Yeah, I totally agree. Perturbation causes an induction, so like, it's a rate of induction. Word. All right,
Hey,
Toby,
somebody
you said
should
you're
read the
back
outer space one I just posted, since that's right on topic.
I think we've read that one too, actually.
Have you guys also read What is the process of building a theory of everything?
No, we have not read that.
No, not that, man.
Let's read it if you guys are down.
Well, before you commence, can I ask, this counter space is mentioned here. What is the origin of that term? I mean, those words. Is it Ken Wheeler or is it someone else?
I don't think so.
That's a good question.
I think Eric Dollard is a proponent of that term.
That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, I've heard Eric use that term repeatedly. He enjoys the concept of counter space, and I agree with his use of it, actually. It's kind of what I've been talking about here a little bit.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll search Eric Dollard's works to see if I can find where he uses it. Thank you.
Sure, Eric. Look for his more recent presentations, and by recent I mean in the last 15 years, as opposed to, the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the first time I heard the term was Ken Wheeler. I just don't remember him ever saying specifically that he came up with it or anything, but I don't know. I don't know. Eric Dollard, him and Eric Dollard agree on a lot, but they don't agree on everything. I think specifically on like a moral level or something, he had some choice words for him morally.
I think scenarios like that just come down to as a product of dissimilar life experience. You attack exposition and learning acquisition facts about a technology from different angles, depending on your culture, your family structure, what you saw as a kid, and the opportunities you get on the way up. And that's where I give Eric a lot of credit, especially with his association with the the Navy rather, and RCA. He was one lucky guy in the earlier part of his life.
Yeah, I got no beef with him. I don't know. Seemingly, you know much more than I do about him. I've heard him say some pretty profound things, though.
Yeah, he's also really unafraid to just reflexively knee-jerk respond when he doesn't know about something. He'll just, the shoulders come up. Just, I don't know about that. I know this and I know this, but I don't know that. And you just kind of move right along. His ego is so uninvolved most of the time when he talks.
Yeah, very cool. I think I've heard him have some very interesting takes on like the sun and moon. Have you ever heard him talk about the sun and the moon?
Yeah, he calls it a converter, where we're seeing the downside of the process on our end. And it was when he was in his car. And the guy interviewing him said, hey, so what is the sun? He's like, he says, well, it's a converter. It's a transformer of some kind, producing into the spectrum we see and the heat that we get. And he says, okay, well, what's powering that? He says, I don't know. Nobody knows that. They just kind of moved it on from there. Next relevant question.
Yeah, nice. Sounds like a flat earther.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
someone
would
else-
be a very interesting conversation with Eric, I'm sure.
Yeah. Does someone else
Hey,
want to read this?
you can read that one you're talking about if you want. Go ahead and read that one. About the unified theory.
I will read it if everyone is cool with it.
Yeah, if you're down, go for it.
Sure. It's very interesting experience reading out loud. Because
We do it a lot around here. It is a little awkward at times.
Well, it's like I
It's a
just don't want to start
blast.
reading really fast.
Oh, you're good. Whatever, however
not?
you're comfortable, honestly.
Go for it.
Well, I want to like put some inflection so it's digestible. For not just you guys, like for me as well, right? But anyway, I have a thing where I'll start reading the second sentence while my mouth is reading the first one. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have that problem sometimes. Or the inverse.
So, what is the process of building a theory of everything? What are the current obstacles preventing us from doing so? If you want to have a theory of everything, you have to start with it, not run into different cul-de-sacs pointing in different opposite directions, i.e. relativity theory and quantum theory, and then lament that they never converge into one glorious alley towards truth. Relativity and quantum theory will forever remain incompatible and never lead to an understanding of the universe simply because they are founded on incompatible premises, which both are not representative of physical reality. Relativity theory collapses time into space such that time can be seen as a kind of fourth spatial dimension due to the fact that simultaneity is relativized in relation to velocity and the fact that there is no privileged frame of reference. This means that within the theoretical framework of relativity, there can be no absolute sense in which an event can be said to have preceded or succeeded any other event. The twin paradox, often used to quote unquote explain relativity, actually destroys it because it only can stand if you violate the premise of relativity. The symmetry and interchangeability of the twin situations, you have to call one stationary, and by doing so, relativity collapses. Wow.
Yep. That's dude, that's huge. There's a whole bunch of problems with the twin paradox and all that. Where
Yeah, I just never heard it put quite that distinctly.
Dude, it's one of those things where when you hear it, you're like, oh wow, that's super logical. How can, like, you almost start gaslighting yourself. Like, it can't be that easy, right? Like, is this a cheat code?
Yeah, that's relativity's like that a lot though.
Yep.
A lot.
Because it's that retarded.
Yep.
Was the point just being made that because relativity says you don't know which one's moving away from the other, you can't claim that one is aging differently than the first?
Yeah, it's like specifically that you can, since there's no absolute, you could never even compare the two to measure against one another because you're gonna have to have one of them being stationary to have that absolute frame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. He also made a point on one of these that there's never been a true test of time dilation because it's always in the one-way respect, because relativity would require both frames to be equally valid. So the stationary clock would somehow have to desync, proportional to the clock that was, moving. And that's never been measured, right? It's always a stationary clock and a moving clock. So like there's another one too, where it's just like an incomplete proof of it, right? So when they do all these, oh, look, we put a clock on an airplane and blah, blah, blah. Like, nah, dude, it's only a half, it's only a half representation of the full proof required to substantiate your position of relative simultaneity.
Yeah, it's like, in a way, you can look at it two ways. It's like, wow, relativity is so retarded. Or you can look at it like it's actually a valiant effort because you're trying to explain something that's impossible. You're trying to keep alive what isn't true. Right. And like, because to do the heliocentric model, you have to go over here to where you just have like, yeah, sure, it doesn't actually work, but you know what I'm saying.
The Royals paid to make sure it went by.
Well, I think that it was all kind of it was kind of like presented in such a way that like, wow, this place is so incredible that it's like impossible to fully grasp. It's very complex. So I think that the initial adoption was actually like an appreciation of perplexity of creation, and ironically, that has evolved into the exact opposite. You know. Yeah, have you guys ever read the intro to 100 Authors Against Einstein?
No, I haven't actually ever even read that. I know of it, but I've never read it.
Dude, yeah. Have you ever read 3,000 Physicists Against Einstein?
Oh, wait, what is actually the name of something, or are you just making
No,
a joke?
no, there's that one that exists. I have it.
Wow.
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, I'll see if I can pull it up.
Are you trolling me right now?
No, I'm serious. It's like, so what happened is in Germany, they basically they were the first place to start censoring criticisms of Einstein's theory. So, and there's this buildup of all the publications that got censored. I've got it somewhere. I'll have to find it, but it's it's like 3,000 critiques and just like different physicists and whatnot, just dropping little nuggets of how DS relativity theory is, that all got suppressed in Germany.
Wow. Yeah, man. If I would love to check that out. It may be in the thing. Did I get it? Did I steal it from you?
What's that? Oh yeah.
There's an act.
Yeah, when I find it, it'll be in there. It's somewhere in there. I just gotta find the name of it.
Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, like the reason I brought it up is because it put it very elegantly and succinctly at the very beginning of that, and it says basically like just using a term, relativity theory, they've been able to basically pull off the impossible, because it bends the simple perplexed mind. And that's such a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's
Like
just
it just bends the simple perplexed mind.
it's just to gaslight you, right? They're like, look, if I move this ladder fast enough, I can fit it into a barn that's clearly too small for it to fit in. And it's like everyone's like, oh no way, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah, tell me more. I'm not gonna be the one that says it doesn't work.
Tell me more about that. It's like, yeah, dude. And if the ladder is moving in a straight line, you also can't even measure its velocity. And they're like, what? No way. And then, yeah. And then they just
it's like, dude, it's like collective societal intellectual insecurity. That's what it is, right? Because no one wants to be the person in the room that says like, wait, that doesn't make sense, because they're terrified at the idea that they're going to be the stupid ones. Like, so then what happens is everyone in the room pretends it makes sense, but no one in the room understands it. You know,
it's called continuing to pay the rent.
That's true. There's like a sunk
but then you get why they get triggered though when we come around and we're like, yeah, relativity's retarded.
Oh, dude, it's the worst, bro. Listening to all these, relativity can only explain blah 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 on the complete, like, yeah, like, bro, it like fails it makes the wrong prediction in the Wang experiment. Like you can literally measure linear motion. The whole base premise of your theory just is gone. So like for you to to turn around and have to entertain further mathematical abstractions into the motions of small, tiny quantized particles that pop in and out of existence, It's like, yeah, dude, sick, bro. Tell me more about that.
What sucks though is like relativity is so logically bankrupt, it should never get to the point where you're even testing it. You know what I'm
No,
saying? Like,
yeah, it's literally riddled with paradoxes.
It's
that's
like,
what
hey,
Tesla did. Like Tesla didn't go to his lab like, let me come up with a way to refute relativity. He's like, this is stupid.
well, do you need to know the syntax
Not even-
of the Lorentz transform to know that it's fucking retarded to apply it to transform yourself out of reality? Like, no. I don't think so.
Einstein, I mean,
So,
no, dude,
yeah.
dude, Tesla did such good, right? He's like, for one, like, this whole thing can't be true because space can't have properties. That's ridiculous. That's like saying God has properties that we can understand and define. It's ridiculous. It's like saying something acts on nothing. Anyway, like that's how he went about it. He would always give it like 2 or 3 sentences just to address the elephant in the room and then just move right on. Like, because it was just that stupid, or he's like, I mean, even if you pretend that somehow space can have properties and something can act on nothing, whatever that means, the curvature would straighten out with equal and opposite reaction. So anyway, like that's how he went about it. And he was right. He was right. You don't have to do a test to prove it wrong. It's like, it just doesn't, it can't even be proposed. It wouldn't even be submitted as an exhibit in the courtroom. It's inadmissible. You know what I'm saying?
Impressive
Shall we
math,
dive
but
back
he
in?
understood the science too well. I don't think Faraday would have fallen for it either, because he was all about experimentation, and he intuited too much to fall for something like relativity. There's no, but it's it's like the ultimate. It's the ultimate emperor has no clothes, right? Like everyone just pretends that they get it, and like it makes sense, and like the speed of light's constant, and we've got a whole society built around it. And
Yeah,
everyone
and if
just
you ever want to know, kind of like just go Google, is relativity true? How do we know relativity is true? How was relativity proven? And then just start reading the propaganda and put yourself in the mindset of like the average person. Dude, they're not going to go against those articles. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
it's really that.
straight up, man. That's what it was like when I was trying to learn it when I didn't care enough about it. And I was like, yeah, this is overwhelming. It's probably true. Some math lad figured it out.
It's presented as so definitively true and indisputable that it's like it really does take some intellectual fortitude to even begin to question it. All right,
Shall
cool.
we dive back in?
Yeah. Within quantum field theory, however, this is not the case. And just a reminder, we just went through the twin paradox. Within quantum field theory, however, this is not the case. A quantum event has either occurred already or it has not. And if a quantum event has not yet occurred, then that event exists within an indeterminate superposition in which the exact properties of the event have not been decided. In other words, there's a very concrete sense of before and after within quantum field theory, which is not present within relativity theory. Within the former framework, there is a very real distinction between what has and has not yet occurred, whereas in the latter, all events are objectively speaking occurring at the same time. The cat paradox, often used to quote unquote explain the quantum world, actually was formulated by Schrödinger as a scathing critique of quantum mechanics because it violates one of the fundamental laws of logic, LNC, the law of non contradiction. Schrödinger's mechanics was, quote, wave mechanics, not quantum mechanics. Indeed. And people present that as like, it's like a staple of evidence for quantum mechanics. The contradictions within these theories, as well as between these two fundamental theories, are substantial and far too serious to be simply ignored. A discrepancy of 10 to the 120th power, i.e., the most embarrassing problem in all of physics, quote unquote, and quote, the worst theoretical prediction in all of history, that is Michio Kaku, of course, except ignoring is kind of exactly what happened. Lacking any clear resolution to these contradictions, physicists mostly just swept this problem under the carpet and carried on with business as usual. Quantum field theorists continued doing quantum field theory and would go on to begin the extremely expensive as well as extremely lucrative search for the various subatomic entities predicted by quantum theory. Astrophysicists, on the other hand, largely ignored the lack of space-time curvature implied by quantum theory and proceeded to begin making immensely far-reaching inferences about the nature of the cosmos under the assumption that Einstein's relativity theory was actually correct, despite observations which tell us that relativity is actually wrong. It's usually at this point in the discussion when science apologists defer to the Feynman-esque shut up and calculate mentality. Quote, perhaps the universe is just too bizarre for our stupid monkey brains to understand. Hey, what do you know? You're not a physicist. You weren't authorized to have opinions about the sacred wisdom, right? We should simply trust the science, right? Hey, maybe we just need a really advanced AI to figure this all out for us. Or just maybe the science simply was wrong. The latter is exactly what Heisenberg told us, and he did so in no uncertain terms when he wrote, quote, that even major modifications of present physical theories would not transform them into the desired new theory, as quite different and novel ideas are required. Secondly, the impact of quantum theory and relativity theory on the minds of those scholars who helped found them during the first half of our century is conceivably such that they are imprisoned by these theories, and thus cannot help but reason conformably, that is, in terms of traditional concepts, whereas the need is for a whole revolution of thought, which can only be carried through by nonconformists. And that is us. That's what we're doing. Just a reminder. That is literally describing us, in my opinion.
Group
If
of
we really,
nonconformists.
yeah, well, just like we're the people that are doing what we're doing are the only ones that are going to fix the problem. In fact, it's got to the point where you're going to have to be outside of the system to even be able to see it with clarity, you know. Ironically. All right. If we really want a, quote, theory of everything, we have to start with an assumption that has everything baked into it, an assumption of oneness from which everything emanates or which permeates everything. This approach turns out to be the oldest theory of mankind and has been around for thousands of years, tracing back to ancient Egypt, China, India, and Greece. The monad, the one, is the root of all monadic philosophies throughout history, all the way up to the 20th century, when Kurt Godel crushed the arrogance of mathematicians who claimed they could explain the whole universe using math. Bertrand Russell had published the first volumes in his ambitious Principia Mathematica project to prove step by step that mathematics was a complete and absolute consistent system of knowledge. At the same time, Ludwig Wittgenstein was attempting to prove mathematics was based on a perfect system of logical arguments. German mathematician David Hilbert was grounding math in fixed axioms that would produce a unifying theory of everything. He was so sure of his results that he announced at a math conference in Göttingen that for mathematicians there were no unsolvable problems and all of nature could be explained completely using math. At the end of his speech, he shouted triumphantly something in German. We must now, which translates to, we must now know everything and we will know everything. Or we must know everything and we will know everything. He became famous for that passionate outburst, which became the new credo of mathematicians everywhere. But sitting in the audience that day was Kurt Godel, who a year later would publish a proof that in a single stroke destroyed all the pompous assumptions of Hilbert, Russell, Wittgenstein, and scores of other mathematicians around the world. Godel showed that mathematics is a partial and forever incomplete system that will never be able to discover all the truths in the universe. For mathematicians, this was like calling the queen of the sciences a whore. His proof shows that any axiomatic logical system, such as arithmetic, cannot be both consistent and complete because there will always be statements that are true but not provable with any formal theory. You guys, let me know if I go too fast. I'm trying to not go fast.
No, that's great.
Protests against Godel's ideas came from around the world. There were reports of mathematicians committing suicide when they read this proof, and untold scores of math students dropped out or changed their majors. Cambridge mathematician Alan Turing invented a machine that used only yes or no decisions to eliminate the gray areas in Godel's proof and sort out exactly what problems could be processed mathematically. Turing's machine became the very first electronic computer, but it did nothing to soothe mathematicians' souls, for it was soon proven that any algorithmic machine or computer is also inconsistent and incomplete. Bertrand Russell abandoned his Principia project. Wittgenstein first mercilessly attacked Godel, but later admitted that math was essentially a game that, quote, no mathematical statements were true in any real sense. David Hilbert retired and worked to find applications where his theories could be applied. His famous credo died with him and is now engraved on his gravestone. In his final years, Godel, I don't know if that's how you say it, was working on a corollary to his theorem which expanded on the fact, quote, that the ultimate complete truth about our universe can only be found outside the circle of our universe, which means in metaphysics. He believed it could be proven that there was one mind behind all the various appearances and activities of the world, and that this one mind exists independently of its individual properties projected into the world. He also stated that mind is not just not localized in the brains of people, but exists everywhere at once. This is when thousands of years of monadic philosophy comes full circle, giving us all we need to start over and create a modern, quote, theory of everything, under the condition that we accept that it will not be a theory embedded in necessarily incomplete physics, but a theory embedded in complete metaphysics. Tesla said the same thing. We need to allow ourselves to learn from Akhenaten, 14th century BCE, who proclaimed Aten the single source of light and mind in the universe and the, quote, giver of all life. The androgynous Aten exists beyond duality in a state of unchanging oneness. Unlike other gods, the Aten has no human traits or weaknesses. It has no attributes, no spatial extension, or temporal duration. It simply exists in the monistic light of pure awareness, and by that existence causes all else to exist. That was a lot. We should learn from the Tao Te Ching that the monad, the Aten, the Tao, should not be worshipped, but rather sensed in the feeling of being alive as the, quote, field of awareness underlying the natural order of things. From David Bohm's Implicit Order. Practically no philosopher of consequence throughout history missed or ignored the monadic principle of the universe. Hermes Trismegistus described the monad as an intelligent sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Incommensurability of counter space. Valentinus described the monad as the source of the pleroma, the spiritual cornucopia of infinite fullness from which the universe sprung forth, all-encompassing potential of ultimate rest. Plotinus described the monad as an indivisible whole without attributes that can't be any existing thing and is beyond human ability to conceive of it. Well, you got all kinds of stuff here. Lamblicus maintains that the ineffable monad is, quote, outside time and space, but is the source of the sole eternal reason, the logos that creates the universe. He described the monad as the realm of original thought, while the dyad is the domain of objects and the results of thought. Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi equated the monad with Aristotle's idea of the first cause. They taught that the first cause is in a state of eternal self-contemplation, which creates a self-reflect, or which creates a reflection in a new level of emanation of intellect. Ibn Sina, known as Avicenna, believed that monad was a logically necessary entity that cannot not exist at the head of creation. In Senna's model, the infinite mind of the monad interacts with the human brain to create intellect and self-awareness in individuals. Hey, I gotta go help with the Leah real fast. There's all kinds of quotes here. Sorry. I gotta go help with her real quick. All right, be right back.
Cool, no problem. We can chill for a minute.
Can someone just continue?
Somebody could
Yeah,
continue.
someone else has to stream.
Yeah,
Send
but
it,
then how,
Gene.
if when we need to scroll down, we either someone else start the stream. Yeah.
Oh, is he streaming? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd have to go find this question and answer.
That's logistically tough.
So we can just chill for a minute.
Hey, yo, what are you guys reading from?
Brenner Comp Night? Like a
Yeah,
Brenner.
I think I've told you about him, Issa. The guy I did all those comps for. They're
For sure, you have heard about him via Dave by now at least 6 or 7 times.
I probably sent some of them to you. I don't know. I found this guy. I was listening to Witsit talk one time about ether, and he mentioned counter space, so I looked it up, and I stumbled upon this guy on Quora. It's been flat smacking people on there since 2016. I've never heard anyone else bring him up, and he's a scholar and amazing writer and thinker. And so I started taking screenshots with my phone and sending them to my email, and then making these comps up that are like 1 page reads that you can see the whole answer. He was also really honest about all the pandemic shit, calling out the virus and the pseudoscience of that. So I figured he was going to get taken down even from Quora probably anytime soon. So I started like scrambling to get all the information from him I could. And then these guys picked up on it after they ran into some of the same things from talking to this geocentrist that they had talked with Bennett. And he was saying some of the same things about kinematics and dynamics. And that's one of the things that Michael Brenner harps on a lot. There's a big difference. That's like the key to a lot of it, is that they want to just describe things mathematically. Just kinematics. Yes, fireworks.
Word, thank you.
Yeah, he's brilliant, dude. You love him. Just look up here. I'll send you the link for his Quora page. You'll probably get lost for days knowing you. Finally, somebody telling the truth that's got like a real scholarly approach to it. That's, you know, I don't know, it's hard to find information on him outside of Quora. I don't know if his name's actually Michael Brenner or not, but can't find anything on him. Other Michael Brenners that people are confused with him. But it's good. I've actually been emailing with him, so he might come on and talk to us at some point.
Hey, yo, have you read Frank America's book on Flat Earth?
No, I'd like to though. That guy's great. That's
Yeah, no. You should check. I forget the name of the book. He's written a couple books actually, and, but he's pretty slick with it.
Yeah, he used to go by Spiritual North, right?
We don't see no curvature.
Yep. I've sent that to everybody in here. Alan wouldn't open the link, or he didn't want to listen to it. I always recommend that.
Oh yeah, good man, good.
I love that song.
That's a great.
It's in my top. Yeah.
That was like, you know,
A lot of
it was
these.
it was such a cool.
Yeah, they were like, I'm nostalgic about your music. Actually, I mentioned you on fucking Flat Earth Fridays last night. I was like, shout out to Isa Mahalski. If nobody knows who he is, go to his channel. I spelled your name. Go to YouTube. Check out his playlist. It's nostalgic for me because he was doing great music when I first figured this out. And yeah, so you got to get up in there and show your face maybe at some point, or not show your face, but just talk on there, you know?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I love Frank America, man. But even his book. I tell you what, I'd love to see like just like we're reading this guy, if like we don't pull up his book. You know what? Fuck it. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Let me see.
Is there a PDF version?
I don't know. I know he sells.
What do you have a model? What do you have a model? What do you have a model?
I'll see what he says.
Yeah, cool guy. He's actually he started doing stand-up comedy as Frank America, like Flat Earth stand-up comedy. And I can't say that it was like the best of what he's put out, but you know, hey, someone's got to start with that. He was in there hanging out. He was like one of the guys just like us hanging out with each other. So I would listen to him and Issa talk, him and Issa and all the old school people, Snack to the Future, and yeah, a lot of these guys that before I started talking on here. Cathexis. Nobody knows who Cathexis is. Everybody's got to get up on that.
Who?
Cathexis. He was like the Whitsit of the Flat Earth back in the day.
What?
That's a great way.
Yeah,
It
Cathexis.
was like, yeah, that's all. Yeah, dude, Cathexis, and I remember, you know, between the comments, it was so cool. It was like Cathexis and Gem. It was like everything's like. It was just cool. But Cathexis.
Your mic's going a little bit weird.
Hey, who's white noising me?
Yeah.
Or is that not? Is it the stream? Is it what's it stream?
Yeah, so to get rid of it,
Just
you
need
have
to
to
get closer to your
disconnect and rejoin to get rid of it.
Oh, it's what's it stream? It's not Issa. See, you're trying to blame everyone, Dave.
Wait, what's my stream?
Your white noise generator you got going on or something?
No, it's
What?
it's
I'm
not.
muted.
Yeah, Shane.
It's not you, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome back.
Are you guys?
Yeah, you want to pick up where you left off?
Yeah. These quotes are cool. I just hate pronouncing the names. What's up, bro?
What's up, brother? Yo, we were talking about a buddy of mine, kind of like a night like this, like we were reading stuff. My buddy wrote a book, Frank America. I don't know if you heard of him, Spiritual North, whatever. He goes by a lot of names, but a whole bunch of shit. And he wrote a book though, and I'm just because we're all hanging out and you're reading, this guy just made me think like, you should check out his book, and I got to get you all. I got to get a copy of. See what I'm gonna do right now. Keep reading, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, cool, man. Send it to me. I'll check it out. Or send me the name. Where were we?
Right there. You've been seeing
all of these. Yeah, these awesome names here. Well, I won't do as good as Stone, but Ibn Sina, known as Avicenna, believed that monad was a logically necessary entity that cannot not exist at the head of creation. In Sina's model, the infinite mind of the monad interacts with the human brain to create intellect and self-awareness in individuals. Ibn Arabi, so butchered, taught that all things belong to just one entity, the monad. Quote, "We are through it," he wrote, "but it is not through us. We remain with our own root, which is not which is non-existence, yet even things which don't exist are part of the monad. We remain with our own root, which is in non-existence, yet even things which don't exist are part of the monad, all-encompassing potentiality." Gerard Dorn, Belgian philosopher, physician, and alchemist, a student of Paracelsus, writes, "The unus mundus is an underlying monadic reality from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. Magnetism, springing from inertia through loss of inertia or radiative force, returns as dielectricity, gravitative loss of force, back to inertia." John Dee writes his Monas Hieroglyphica. Bruno his De Monade Numero et Figura. Jeez Louise. I would pick this one. Leibniz, his monadology, where he established a logical connection between atoms of consciousness and physical reality. Kant writes his Monadologia Physicia. What language is this? Where he argues that monads are the ultimate principles of all bodies and states, that, quote, "understanding them can unite metaphysics and mathematics." Bertrand Russell, expanded on Kant's ideas in a new viewpoint, now known as Russellian monism, in which a single source or set of properties underlies both consciousness and the physical universe. Russell wanted to create a new physics by focusing on precisely what classical physicists were trained to ignore, the underlying cause or source of physical reality. Schrödinger believed the apparent multiplicity of minds in the world is an illusion, and that there is only one mind, a singularity in consciousness that expresses itself in a myriad of ways. Quote, "The total number of minds in the universe is one," he said, "and consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings." Bernard Hasch, a renowned German-born American astrophysicist, claims modern science and traditional spiritual traditions are describing the same fundamental single reality. It would appear that is the case. Philip Goff, professor at Durham University, whose research focuses on philosophy of mind and consciousness, argues that theories in which the consciousness arises from physical processes, or materialism, and theories in which the consciousness is separate from the body, or dualism, both face insurmountable difficulties. Instead, he suggests a form of panpsychism, the view that consciousness is an intrinsic part of the universe. That's actually what energy is. Hedda Hasselmort believes the physical sciences revealed the structure but not the true nature of the physical world. Her research focuses on neutral monism, which is an umbrella term for a popular class of theories that reject the dichotomy of mind and matter and suggest that the fundamental nature of reality is neither mental nor physical. In other words, it's something neutral. Isaac Newton got so very close but couldn't or wouldn't follow through with a logical interpretation of observation. He correctly defined force and motion as loss of inertia, F equals ma, but couldn't bring himself to see free fall as return to inertia via loss of force. That's fire. He fell for the simplest logical trap imaginable. And that was because he was a mathematician at heart, not a philosopher holding up logic as highest arbiter of thought. He practically said, quote, cats are furry animals, therefore all furry animals are cats, which we all immediately recognized as a potentially false conclusion. There is only one world where this conclusion is true, a world of cats, but this is not our world. Yet for 400 years, we've repeated this error when we say force is mass times acceleration, therefore all acceleration is force per unit mass. Wrong. Free fall is the opposite of force. It is the loss of force, returning an object back to inertia. Had Newton followed the path of logic and closed the circle, we would have a theory of everything by now, simply by understanding that what gravity really is. But we need not despair. We already have a rough draft of the theory of everything in Walter Russell's grand opus about the monad of light titled The Universal One. The Universal One, an exact science of the one visible and invisible universe of mind and the registration of all idea of thinking, mind, and light, which is matter and also energy. Walter Russell. When you find the word God, good.
No. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
I think it's almost done.
I was gonna say, when you do get done, at the end of that, there's a comment by Tony Emmeret about Gnosticism right underneath when you finish. That would be worth reading too. If you want.
When you find the word God there, let yourself not be put off, as you obviously have not been put off by Newton's use of the term Lord God Pantocrator, but try to understand the difference. The monad has no property, no demands, nor preferences. It is not a cult object and doesn't need nor want to be worshipped. It is pure awareness from which everything springs forth. That this concept has predictive and thus scientific power is shown in Russell's harmonic octaves of the elements, where he predicted things the complementary element to gold, things the complementary element to gold, which was found 20 years later, right where it was predicted and named promethium. This system also showed that hydrogen is actually an alkali metal, something that just hours ago appeared on a physics channel. Hydrogen, a unique case, covalent bond, alkali metal. Wow. It's time to learn from 2,000 years of monadic philosophy and cast it in an already well-prepared modern frame of theory of everything, because the misguided constructs of the standard model of cosmology, as well as the standard model of particle physics, are crumbling, upheld only by ever more absurd injections of money, as well as ever more crazy ideas. And per New Perspectives requests, Tony Emerton, Gnosticism is the belief that human beings contain a piece of God, the highest good or a divine spark within themselves, which has fallen from the immaterial world into the bodies of humans. All physical matter is subject to decay, rotting, and death. Those bodies in the material world created by an inferior being are therefore evil. Trapped in the material world but ignorant of its status, the pieces of God require knowledge or gnosis to inform them of their true status. That knowledge must come from outside the material world, and the agent who brings it is the savior or redeemer. Gnostics promoted concepts of radical dualism that govern the universe. This was polarized as the soul/spark against the flesh, light against darkness, God who does not create, originally emanated archons, powers like the light from the sun, seen but not physical. One of the archons, Sophia, or wisdom, in a moment of weakness produced the demiurge, who then created a physical universe, including humans, and philosophical thought, logos, or word, was the principle of rationality that connected the highest good, God, to the material world. All right.
I guess it's not totally related to the whole concept that we were talking about. But,
one of the direct refutations to the Gnostic idea that matter is evil is Genesis, and basically when God created everything, he said it is good when he created it. And so like matter being inherently evil is a non-Christian doctrine, basically a heresy.
Oh yeah, just to clarify, I'm just reading You know.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I understand, but I'm just like giving you the like like in the beginning when he creates each thing, he says this is good, right? Whereas the Gnostics went directly against that and said that the material world is evil. Basically, matter is a trap.
Hey, I have one queued up to read, and I'm trying to go into my hotel room, but I'm sitting in the car. I'm going to read this if you don't mind, for something that a good follow up to that one, which I put the link in the chat if you want to bring it up. But I'm going to read it off the Brenner Torah page.
Sure, yeah, I can pull it up on my stream. Yeah.
All right. And scientific facts become false due to new discoveries after they have been accepted as truth. Let me know when you have it up.
I can't find it.
It might be up a little ways.
Oh, I found it.
34 after the hour.
Cool, go for it.
All right, so the question is, can scientific facts become false due to new discoveries after they have been accepted as truth? Starts off with a quote by Lee Smolin. The tendency of a group of human beings to quickly come to believe something that its individual members will later see as obviously false is truly amazing. And this group of human beings Smolin refers to is the scientific community, where individual members clearly can see the obvious falsehoods buried in what is generally sold as scientific facts. In other answers, we find the Battle of Gettysburg cited as scientific fact. That is wrong. It is a historic empirical fact. Scientific facts are the twisted interpretations of observations so they can fit a paradigm, a philosophical prejudice. In cosmology, for instance, take redshift expansion, which is sold as scientific fact. Yet, individual members of the scientific community know better and should know better. S. Weinberg, quote, the answer is space does not expand. Cosmologists sometimes talk about expanding space, but they should know better. Astronomer Royal M. Rees, quote, expanding space is a very unhelpful concept, end quote. But all of the evidence, you say? Well, here's about the evidence. Tom Van Flandern, quote, perhaps never in the history of science has so much quality evidence accumulated against a model so widely accepted as fact within a field, end quote. Our take the accepted as fact doomsday vision of the heat death of the universe. He quotes Eric Lerner, the universe we observe is simply not decaying. The generalization of the law of increasing disorder to the entire cosmos is unsupported by observation. So he's going against entropy there, it sounds like. Same with sold as fact inflation of the cosmos. Roger Penrose, quote, inflation is a fashion high energy physicists visited on cosmology, adding caustically, even aardvarks think their offspring are beautiful. Big Bang is sold as scientific fact, yet individual members of the scientific community know better. He quotes Fred Hoyle. Big Bang cosmology is a form of religious fundamentalism, as is the furor over black holes. And this is why these peculiar states of mind have flourished so strongly over the past quarter century. It is in the nature of fundamentalism that it should contain a powerful streak of irrationality, and that it should not relate in a verifiable practical way to the everyday world. It is also necessary for a fundamentalist belief that it should permit the emergence of gurus whose pronouncements can be widely reported and pondered on endlessly for the reason that they contain nothing of substance, so that it would take on an eternity of time to distill even one drop of sense from them. Big Bang cosmology refers to an epoch that cannot be reached by any form of astronomy, and in more than 2 decades, it has not produced a single successful prediction, end quote.
No one expresses the dilemma between a philosophical position and a factual reality better than Edwin Hubble. He quotes, "First, the horror of violating the demands of a philosophical position, that of the Copernican principle. Quote, such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe and analogous, in a sense, to the ancient concept of a central Earth. This hypothesis cannot be disproved, but it is unwelcome, and it would only be accepted as a last resort in order to save the phenomenon. Therefore, we disregard this possibility. The unwelcome position of a favored location must be avoided at all costs. Such a favored position is intolerable. Therefore, in order to restore homogeneity and to escape the horror of a unique position, it must be compensated by spatial curvature. There seems to be no other escape. That was in 1937. But then the sober recognition of facts, in quotes, he quotes, the disturbing feature, or I guess he's still continuing with Hubble's quote here. The disturbing features are all introduced by the recession factors, by the assumption that redshifts are velocity shifts, the departure from the linear law of redshifts, and the departure from uniform distribution, the curvature necessary to resolve homogeneity, the excess material demanded by the curvature. Each of these is merely the recession factor in another form. And if the recession factor is dropped, if redshifts not primarily velocity shifts, the picture is simple and plausible. There is no evidence of expansion and no restriction of the timescale, no trace of spatial curvature, and no limitations of spatial dimensions. Moreover, there is no problem of internebular matter. So 1937. That cosmology in general is philosophy and not science. That cosmology in general is philosophy and not science has been known since, that cosmology in general is philosophy and science has been known since Copernicus himself told us so. And he quotes Copernicus. So far as hypotheses are concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy, which cannot furnish it, lest he accept the truth as the truth, ideas conceived for another person, and depart from this study a greater fool than when he entered it. And he quotes George Ellis, people need to be aware that there is a range of models that can explain the observations. For instance, I can construct you a spherically symmetrical universe with Earth at its center, and you cannot disprove it based on your observations. You can only exclude it on philosophical grounds. What I want to bring into the open is the fact that we are using philosophical criteria and choosing our models. A lot of cosmology tries to hide them. That was from 1995 in Scientific American. Individual members of the scientific community are aware that philosophical grounds need to give way to new discoveries. And he quotes George Ellis, dark energy is problematic. No one really knows what it is. We can make an educated guess and use quantum theory to ask how much of it there might be, but then we overshoot by an astounding factor of 10 to the power of 120. And that is grounds enough to take a hard look at our assumptions about the universe and our place in it. If we analyze the supernova data by assuming that the Copernican principle is correct and get out something unphysical, I think we should start questioning the Copernican principle. Whatever our theoretical predictions are, they will, in the end, have to give way to the observational evidence. End quote. All the above only shows that practically the entirety of what you have grown to accept as scientific facts will have to give way to sober and unprejudiced interpretations of observations. The solar model of a self-compressing gaseous nuclear furnace, for instance, was an ad hoc idea of Arthur Eddington, who, without a shred of evidence and against all rational consideration, tried to satisfy Darwin's claims of geological times of billions of years, which Darwin himself, based on his mentor, Charles Lyell's ad hoc dogma of uniformitarianism, which itself violated all and every single observation brought in the field of geologists, including Darwin's personal observations. Darwin's biological gradualism, as well as Lyell's geological uniformitarianism, do not reflect observations and are therefore not facts, despite being accepted as truth. Aristotle has been made fun of for claiming that the sun is hot because of friction resulting from rubbing against the firmament, although most likely not the case. The concept is at least based on empirical evidence, empirical facts. In this case, the fact that the friction produces heat. In this case, the fact that the friction produces heat. So that's the empirical evidence that the friction produces heat. In contrast to that, our modern and scientific model of the sun is based on pure superstition, a rabbit pulled out of the hat with no basis in physical reality.
Does an
Gases
induction
do
cause
not-
heat?
What?
Right? Well, doesn't induction cause heat? Wouldn't like a dielectric be super inductive or whatever? Never mind.
Yeah, we could go into that.
Only the
I guess I
hysteretic
should
effects
finish
cause the
reading
heat.
Hysteretic. What?
Historicity causes it. Yeah.
You got
So yeah, okay. So in contrast to that, our modern and scientific model of the sun is based on pure superstition, a rabbit pulled out of the hat with no basis in physical reality. Gases do not form bodies, do not form surfaces, do not produce continuous spectra. Furthermore, systems cannot perform work on themselves. Means they do not self-compress and self-heat, as that violates one of the fundamental tenets of physics. 19th century astronomers and physicists, including Kirchhoff, understood that the sun must be a liquid, as only condensed matter can have a surface and produce a continuous black body spectrum. Then came the introduction of the Catechism of Scientism of the 20th century, and with it, a regression into dogmatic belief systems. Right now, we witness a collapse of those sandcastles, and representatives of the top scientific echelon are spearheading it, not tinfoil hat wearing quacks in grandma's basement, as Quran's like C. Keel would like to have it. Nobel laureate in physics 2020, Roger Penrose, and then it's just a graphic of Penrose saying we were wrong in the first picture.
For
and then
YouTube
we were wrong.
thumbnails.
Is it? Because
Yeah,
okay.
4 different YouTube thumbnails. We were wrong. We were wrong. Please listen. I'm sorry we lied.
I don't know if you want to play any of those, but that's the end of the whole.
No, he's
history.
just showing the thumbnails.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
right on, man.
It's a really good one.
Definitely.
Oh, that was a lot of good ones tonight.
As always, it's Michael Brenner. How could it not be?
Right. Well, cool. Did anyone else want to volunteer to read one, or should we wrap it up? All right, then. Let's wrap it up.
Unless Shane wanted to go into what he was talking about with the friction and the sun or anything, like there's one. If anyone wants to discuss any of the details of that, I don't know. We could wait till after.
It was just a nice, easy counter to all we know what the sun is. It's a burning ball of hydrogen, helium, and gas that we use stellar spectroscopy to tell through all the hydrogen and helium in the atmosphere that we know is definitely doing that. And it's like, well, conversely, it could just be like a dielectric thing, getting super hot through induction with an ever-feeding loop that keeps it super hot. But,
Sounds like you're just trying to be like Witsit with your word salad.
That kid was so funny. I was like, oh man, I got to get better at vocally word salading so I can do a better written word salad.
I think that's what Eric Dollard said. He wrote something on the sun, but I haven't read it yet. But I think that's his ideas there.
Is it now? Interesting. Yeah, that makes more sense. Right, and it's like backed in reality and measurement and things we understand as opposed to like I never knew. I guess I should have known that the heliocentric model of the sun was made up on the spot to support some other backwards compatible bullshit, but I didn't know that. So I learned that tonight.
Yeah, that Robitaille guy had a really good video on it, breaking down all the assumptions that they use to explain that continuous spectrum. So that point that Brenner closed on about how it doesn't produce a continuous spectrum, it wouldn't even be possible. And like even the guy that they use to decipher the interpretations of the readings, Kirchhoff's laws, even that guy was he was like, yeah, it's definitely a liquid because we don't even have evidence that a body can produce a continuous spectrum of gas like that. So, you know, in the lab, we have the spectrum doing one thing, and then the sky, we have it doing another. And they were like, oh, you know what? They're both happening at the same time, and they're both true.
That's insane, man.
Every time you look into it, it's just, oh, not only is it not what you said, but it backwards compatibly supports our position always. So.
Yeah, the classic, really. But anyway, shout out to the sun, 93 million miles away. We'll catch you later when we rotate into you again tomorrow.
It gets to that point where you're like, someone tells you about the way that they lied about something, and you're just like, oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Like, of course. You start saying, of course. Like when you find out about the different lies, it's like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that yet, but of course that's a lie.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It just it starts to become your response to everything because it's just like, oh yeah, yep. Oh, well, of course they made that up. They made everything else up. Like, once the thread gets pulled, yeah, it's crazy, man.
Shout out to editing.
I'm still working over the circular orbit, of course, dude. I'm like, oh, God, I bought into Kepler so hard that I was playing ellipticity with him.
Will it go round in circles?
Yeah, I can repost that so I could reacquaint myself with the truth. Thanks, so.
Yeah, what do you think it says about your dynamic law when you can derive a purely kinematic law from it?
Right?
Did we cheat? Well, on that note, thank you everyone for tuning in to Bring Your Own Brenner Comp number 3. This was awesome, and I think we've only got like
we've only got 2 more.
We've only got about 400 Brenner comps left to read, and then we'll have them all done. So I think we've knocked out maybe about 30 or so of them at this point. But yeah. Take care, everybody. Oh, tune in on tomorrow night for a live X Twitter space on the topic of ether or cosmology, something along those lines. And then Tuesday night, we'll be doing Ether Roundtable number 33. And we will be talking, I think, about Moonlight. I think I'm going to be doing a Moonlight presentation. So tune in for that. And then Wednesday, probably tune in for Schooling Globers over on Earth Awakenings, if that's happening. I'm not sure. And then Thursday, we have reading night yet again. So not Brenner, but we'll be doing more physics reading and or probably getting into another paper or two. And then maybe Friday, Flat Earth Fridays. We'll see what's up with that. And then I
got a special request. Can you take us out with "Welcome to the Show" since we got Issa in the house tonight?
Ooh, that's a cool idea. Yeah, let's definitely do that. Real quick, also, if you didn't, I think we talked about it a little bit at the start of the stream. Check out the Lore Lodge debate between Witsit and Lore Lodge. That was a bit of a trip. The guy kind of got really emotional, as a lot of these people do when it comes to the Flat Earth debate. And Witsit held it together quite well. It was a very well executed debate by Witsit, as frustrating as it was to listen to the fallacious argumentation.
Oh, it's just cringeworthy at the end. They really embarrassed themselves, to be honest.
Yeah, I kind of have the same thoughts, honestly. Does anyone else, have anything that particularly that they want to plug before we close out here?
Yeah, the link's in the chat for the song.
Oh yeah, the song. So cool. I'll go ahead and play us out with that. Then I'll stream it. Or wait, I can't stream the audio. I would have to pull up.
I got you.
Miller's assistant.
I got you, dog.
So yeah, check us out later on.
All right, whenever you're ready, I'll play us out. Or
Cool,
Ether
so
will
go
play
ahead
us
and
out.
sir.
All right.
Welcome to the show where you don't know.
Did I still
if
end
it's
every
part of the
stream with this
show.
song? Just so everybody knows.
Welcome to the show. If you don't know, it's part of the show. Didn't they teach you to reach for the stars while opening up the bars and keeping you chained down with mortgage bills and cars? Vaccines for your arms, kids sounding like supercharged, caffeinated hate-filled scars and rage-quit repertoires. No answers for yards, caught up in emotion that's not even yours. Imposter truths like impeccable retards, lined up for your serving of Gish Gallop and wars. No remedy can save the lost, in love with the yarn. I'm tired of walking into refracted shards, poor science displayed by disgusting bards. Soaked in sin with your dupe is delight and a new hand of cards. Been so long, seems like for love I'm just too hard, I said. Welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know. Intoxicated 8 makes you believe you're spinning in space while you have no shame or grace. It's a disdainful state I used to contemplate how to save myself from my own self-hate. Wonder why I was even made with a dreadful fate, forced to try and awake with a full plate. No one to help me stay awake or educate. I've had to liberate and fight through hidden gates, but my brother, heaven could never be late, and rockets don't work in space. It's all fake. The show is on Mars. It's a joke, but you're too far gone. It won't be long. Fepe's beak is strong. We have our song and we march along like streams of knowledge leading to God's holy pond, and lives of truth that hits the bong and sings the song, turns mankind from the wrong. We come in peace with a holy gown and all of us wearing our holy crowns. So the earth is flat and we probably just won't get along. Just to go along, I said. Welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show.